And we have another person missing, Chris.
Yeah, we have Rich and Jennifer.
Okay, all right. Well, let's give it a minute or so and see how we do. Summer hours. Okay. Well, we'll go to 7:40 and then we'll start. Well, Chris, why don't we begin and maybe you can, we'll let the folks in when it comes to, when they come along, and hopefully we won't get into testimony before they get here. So let's call the meeting to order tonight at basically 7:40 p.m. And I'll read the adequate notice statement. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2021 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Moreover, in order to comply with the national and state declarations of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with the municipal land use law, the Open Public Meetings Act, and the recent operational documents from the Department of Community Affairs, this meeting is being held virtually as a web-based platform with remote public access. Well, guys, I'm sorry, I don't have a flag.
Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jennifer just texted that she can't make it.
Oh, I see. Okay, I didn't see that. Okay.
She just sent it to me.
Okay. All right. So that we're hoping that Mr. Fiore will come in. So do we at present?
He is here.
Oh, Rich is here? Okay, great. Oh, there he is. Yeah, I see him at the bottom there. Okay, great. So we do have a quorum then, I guess, Counselor.
Bill, I apologize. I had a little bit of a unexpected
situation. So
No,
my apologies.
no problem, Rich. I was having some problems with my new computer getting back into Zoom today for some reason. So we started a little bit late. All right. So I'm sorry I don't have a flag, but can we do a Pledge of Allegiance anyway?
Understand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America,
to the republic,
and the republic
And to the
for which
republic
it stands,
for which it
one
stands,
nation,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty
with
and
liberty and
justice
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. I promise I'll have a flag next time.
Mhm.
Chris, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Chairman Anderson,
Present.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Present.
Councilmember Little,
Here.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez is excused. Ms. McNeil,
Here.
record time, by the way.
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Here.
Mr. Zucker is excused. Mr. Perrella,
Here.
Mr. Fiore,
Here.
Mr. Formicelli,
Here.
and Mr. Ashman is excused, and Mr. Warner is also present. You have a quorum. You can proceed.
Great. Thanks, Chris, very much. All right. Well, first item on the agenda is our meeting minutes from our meeting of the 28th. And anybody have any comments, corrections, additions, or deletions to those?
Nope.
I thought they're well done, and pretty straightforward. Anybody have any comments?
They look fine.
Okay, all right, great. Can I have a motion to?
I make a motion to approve.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. And a second, please.
Second.
So moved.
Great, thanks.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. All right, so as far as business is concerned tonight, Counselor, we have 49 Woodland Beechwood at Summit LLC this evening, requesting to be carried to September 27th in a virtual format. Will they need to do additional notice in this particular case?
Not this evening, in that we are announcing they are being carried without further notice to that September 27 date, 7:30 PM virtual meeting. The meeting's anticipated to be virtual. If and when there is a change to that, there'll be announcements made. It'll be on the website, I'm sure. And then we'll address the potential need for the applicant, if that's the case, to renotice. But at least for now, it's without further notice.
All right, so just in terms of other business tonight, we do have a couple of resolutions, the Summit Sport and Spine and the Primrose School franchising company resolution to discuss. And then there's the very end of our agenda tonight, we have some proposed and updated bylaws. And very late this evening, I'm sorry, we sent out the 1996, the old bylaws. And when Steve and Amanda were engaged, they felt that the old bylaws needed to be updated and essentially rewritten. So we have those tonight. We can talk about them a little bit later towards the end of the meeting. So I think at this point, we're ready to begin hearing from Mountain View Development of New Jersey. And do we want to, Counselor, do we want to let the applicant and his team into the meeting?
Chris, you'll do that. Mr. Sheehan, and as well, you're way ahead of me. You know who they are. While Chris is doing that, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I did want to announce that I had an opportunity to review the notice. I found the content of the notice to be sufficient. I found it to be timely served, certified mail June 15 and published June 17, both of which were 10 days prior to the original scheduled hearing date of June 28th. And I believe we made a similar announcement at that time prior to carrying the matter without further notice to this evening, if I recall correctly, at the request of applicant's counsel. So the board does have jurisdiction to hear and decide the case this evening, should we complete it. And I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. All right. Chris, you want to let, if you haven't already, let Mr. Sheehan and his team in for their presentation tonight?
Mr. Sheehan is here. He's just not on video. We're sorting that out.
Okay.
There he is.
There we go.
All right, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. May I begin by determining whether or not my witnesses have logged on by asking if Catherine Winkler is here?
She was a minute ago.
I don't see her here.
She was a minute ago, I think. Right, you said
How
it.
about Ozzy Yassim?
Yeah, I can promote him now.
We lost her.
All right. Kathy just came back too. She's coming in.
Okay, great.
All right.
There we are. Okay, good.
All right. Any, Mr. Chairman, through you, any members of the interested public logged on so that we can address any concerns in a specific nature that they may have?
Chris, we have them held as attendees, I guess, to be brought in at the point at which questions are appropriate. Are you holding them there, Chris, for that?
Correct. We have 6 attendees currently.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can just add one thing, we
Sure.
do have 2 attorneys in the attendees as well. I don't know if any of them are representing parties associated with this application. I do recognize the name of one of them as maybe being a prior counsel in connection, if I recall correctly, with this matter. But in any event, I just wanted the board and Mr. Sheehan to be aware of that fact.
Will
One of the-
the attorneys enter their appearance?
It may make sense to do that so we know who they represent if they're representing someone this evening as opposed to just appearing. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
can Chris promote the 2 individuals with the ESQ at the end of their names, other than me and Mr. Sheehan?
Is one of the attorneys a representative of the
Yeah, this is August Santori Jr.
Beechwood at Summit LLC?
I don't think so.
No?
Or Mr. Santori is a representative of the applicant as well, Mr. Chairman.
I
That
see.
is correct. Just
thank
ordered the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Thank you, Mr. Santori.
Good evening, members of the board. This is Matthew Kapalecchia. I represent the current homeowners of 74 Templar Place.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Good
All
evening,
right.
Mr. Capeloni.
Now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, when you admitted Miss Buller, she lost audio.
Uh-oh.
I just dialed in by phone. I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I think we're ready to go then. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bartholomew A. Sheehan Jr., appearing for the firm of Dempsey Sheehan on behalf of the applicant, Mountain View Development of NJ LLC. The application this evening seeks certain bulk variances which result in an amendment to the previously approved minor subdivision approval with variances granted by this planning board. The original minor subdivision and variance proposal was approved by the planning board on February 27, 2017, and memorialized in a resolution of approval adopted by the board on May 22nd, 2017. That approval proposed a 3-lot subdivision with the existing home to remain on one of the newly created 3 lots, and a new single-family home to be constructed on each of the additional 2 new lots. Newly created Lot 9.01 is a corner lot with frontage on Templar Way, the unimproved section of Sheffield Road, and is the property that is the subject of this current application. That lot was granted variances for the creation of a through lot, a front yard setback of 37.25 feet from the average lot standard, a steep slope disturbance, and a percentage of identified steep slopes, the location of a foundation within a steep slope area, and a garage facing a street with a maximum total open porch area. After the approval, the developer applicant constructed the approved single-family home on lot 9.01. The construction has been completed and the home was under contract of sale with a closing date set for May 25th, 2021. This closing took place after the filing of this application upon the issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy by the Department of Community Services. After construction was completed and during final inspections by the city, it was discovered that the patio as built differed slightly than what was originally proposed, as well as additional steep slope disturbance as a consequence of construction and inadvertent grading. This inadvertent grading was in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road and was associated with the stabilization of fill used to create a functional residential rear yard on lot 9.01. Prior to the issuance of the CO, the temporary CO, the city required the developer applicant to request variance approval for the slight encroachment of the patio into the front yard setback facing the unimproved section of Sheffield Road, as well as for the disturbance of additional regulated steep slopes and the construction of a 6-foot-high retaining wall with a 4-foot fence on top along the property line with the unimproved section of Sheffield Road to facilitate the removal of most of the inadvertent grading in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road. The city forester has also recommended relocation of certain trees and additional plantings, which the applicant agrees to comply with in the event that the application is approved by this board as a condition of that approval. The applicant, Mountain View Development of New Jersey, requests the following relief from the strict application of the requirements of the development regulations. First, variance relief pursuant to NJSA 55D-70C1 and 70C2 to permit a front yard setback for the patio of 29.4 feet, where 35 feet is required in the R15 zone and 39 feet is required by the neighborhood averaging calculation. Second, variance relief to permit the development of the proposed improvements in an area of regulated steep slope pursuant to 35-16 and following. And three, a variance pursuant to 70C1 and 70C2 of the statute to permit the height of a retaining wall of 6 feet in a front yard where 2.5 feet is permitted. The property is developed with a newly constructed single-family home and associated outdoor improvements, including a patio of which approximately 93 to 100 square feet encroaches into the front yard setback from the unimproved Sheffield Road. This part of Sheffield Road abuts County Route 24, State Route 24, and can be screened from any neighbors by plantings installed by the developer and the location of the lot itself. The size of the existing patio is typical of outdoor living areas associated with single-family homes in the neighborhood and comport with the current custom and vogue of contemporary residential living, which favors outdoor living spaces. See Bressman versus Gash and Siacone versus Franklin Lakes. Citations provided in the application, but omitted in this presentation. The shape of the lot, which is a triangle with a rounded corner at the intersection of Templar Way and unimproved Sheffield Road, presents an extraordinary and exceptional situation that imposes a practical difficulty and undue hardship upon the applicants in seeking to develop the property as otherwise permitted pursuant to the Development Regulations Ordinance of the City of Summit. In addition, the applicant proposes to remove much of the inadvertent grading in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road while constructing a 6-foot-high retaining wall necessary to achieve that purpose, which results in the disturbance of regulated steep slopes. The ordinance permits a 2.5-foot retaining wall in the front yard at the curb line. The purpose of the height restriction is to prevent a wall from restricting visibility necessary for the safe operation of vehicles passing, entering, or leaving any lot or parcel of land located in a public thoroughfare. In this instance, the retaining wall is being constructed on the curb line of an unimproved road, which is not used for vehicular traffic and backs up to Route 24 and its 10-foot high plus sound barrier. The plan is engineered, landscaped, and designed to meet the intent and purpose of the steep slope ordinance. In concluding this opening statement, I would like to make 4 quick observations and ask for advice and instruction through the chair concerning required government body involvement. The 4 observations include the as-built plan is, by every standard, a better plan than the one originally proposed and approved. Number 2, the nonconformities requiring variance relief can be screened so that there is no off-site visibility. 3, the circumstance under which the as-built conditions occurred require explanation and may require corrective work in the field. And finally, the Sheffield Road right-of-way is highly unlikely to ever be built out. Finally, in regard to the request for advice and instruction, Mr. Chairman, since the plan of this application proposes leaving 2 feet of fill in the Sheffield right-of-way, a final decision of this board must, in one way or another, abide councilmanic action. And if the board is inclined to, after hearing the testimony of the engineer, accept the current condition with regard to fill in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road as a better plan, then rather than to carry that plan, which requires a license from Common Council as a condition of approval, it would be the request of the applicant that if the board considers the proposal to leave the fill as it currently exists in the unimproved Sheffield Road right-of-way, that the matter be carried and the applicant be given an opportunity to present this plan with a request for a license from council before taking a final action in this matter. The applicant proposes 2 witnesses this evening. The first is Catherine Muller, the civil engineer from Page Muller. And the second witness is the developer, Ozzy Yassin. At this stage, Mr. Chairman, I would respond to any questions that these introductory statements might create. And in the absence of any such questions, then I would ask that the testimony of Kathy Muller be given in this matter and that the secretary admit her to the platform for that purpose to be sworn.
Any members of the board have any questions of Mr. Sheehan?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Sheehan said that the board needs to make some kind of a decision. I never heard that word. I don't even understand what can you clarify the type of decision we need to make?
Are you asking me, sir?
You or
Yes.
Mr. Warner, it sounded like a legal term. You said we need to make I don't know if it started with an M or an E.
This might be
I
relative.
saw Steve smirk when the comment was made, but I don't know.
I
what that
never
means. Could you-
smirked. Let the record reflect.
I know,
I've
I'm
never
just
smirked
kidding,
in my
Steve.
life.
Is this
I know, Steve. Never in your life, but could you
No,
just, whatever
including
that
right now
comment
while I'm
was-
I need
smirking
one
that I made
speaker.
that
I
statement.
need
Great.
one speaker.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
this relative to the work that may be needed to be done in the field? Is that the question, area of the question, perhaps?
No, Mr. Sheehan said the board needs to make a blank decision tonight, and I didn't understand what he meant by that. What type of decision? It was in his last 4 things that he read.
I think he might have used the term perhaps councilmatic
Yeah,
decision.
yes.
But
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
maybe Mr. Sheehan can explain what he means by that, because candidly, I can't.
Well, the governing body, as I'm sure Mr. Warner knows well, is called the Common Council. Their decisions are councilmanic decisions.
Councilmatic.
And for the member, if I may, you will hear testimony this evening from the civil engineer who will describe the approved plan, the plan as it currently exists as built in the field, and the proposed manner in which to address certain nonconformities that might need remediation. When she gives her testimony, she will offer an observation as to whether or not the proposed plan that considers removing all but 2 feet of fill that currently exists in the right-of-way is the right plan, the best plan, or whether or not leaving the existing fill in the right-of-way is a better plan. In either event, if any fill is left in the right-of-way, it requires an action in the form of either a license or a consent by the governing body to approve it. It can't be approved by this board. It's beyond the jurisdiction of a planning board's permitted action. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
And if I may add, at the risk of belaboring the point prematurely, Another potential alternative, if and when we get to that point, is a board can grant a conditional approval conditioned, as we always do, on all sorts of conditions subsequent to the approval for compliance purposes, one of which could be a governing body approval that may or may not come. And if it doesn't come, there could be alternative relief provided for. But maybe it makes sense to cross that proverbial bridge, no pun intended, to your background, Mr. Board Member Perella, if and when we get there.
Any other board members have questions at this point of Mr. Sheehan before he calls his witnesses? Okay, I think Mr. Sheehan, you can go forward and put your witnesses on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because this is an amended site plan, I would ask that the testimony of Catherine Muller be given in this matter and that she be admitted to the platform and be sworn for that purpose.
And with the chair's permission, I could swear both Ms. Muller and Mr. Yassinen, as well as our board professionals, Mr. Dower and Mr. Burgess, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Warner, do we have to vet this engineer's qualifications?
We could swear them all in first.
Okay, all right.
And then we could move a little more expeditiously.
Okay, sure, let's do that.
If all four of you will raise your right hand, please. Do all four of you swear, thank you, swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you all. Please proceed, Mr. Chairman.
I guess the
To allow
question is,
Ms.
do we need to hear from this engineer as to her qualifications?
I suspect Mr. Sheehan will direct her through her qualifications.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Muller, are you a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey? Do we still have you, Kathy?
She's on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's muted.
All right.
Yes, I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and my license is in good standing.
And how long have you been practicing civil engineering in the state of New Jersey?
Since 2005, I've been licensed.
And have you, can you give us the names of 3 boards that you've appeared before, excluding Summit?
Warren Township Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, Watchung Boards, Greenbrook Boards, New Providence Boards, both the board, Planning Board and Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I would submit this witness to voir dire. She is an experienced civil engineer with a license in good standing, and she will submit to any questions that the members of the board or the board's professionals or members of the interested public may have.
Does anyone, as mentioned by council, have any questions of Ms. Mueller? Okay, I think you're all set, Mr. Sheehan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mueller, would you, excuse me, describe for the board what actions you took to file the amended plan currently pending in this application before the board?
Sure. Would you like me to share the plans at this point? We do have a little housekeeping issue since we submitted revised plans I'd like to refer to tonight. We may mark them as an exhibit as they were just submitted last Thursday.
They could be marked as an exhibit and shared because the original plans were submitted in a timely fashion. Are they A1, Chris?
Yes, correct. A1. The cover letter included in that.
And that's the July 2021 revised plans, Ms. Mueller?
Yes.
Thank you. We have them as A1 and they can be shared.
All right, Ms. Mueller, take us through your preparation and the result. And in the course of your testimony, I would ask you to describe the original approved plan and then move into the as-built plan that has been submitted.
Sure. I'll just work through my plans. As Mr. Warner had mentioned, these were revised July 20th, 2021 of this year. on the cover sheet, this was the information that was given to us by the City of Summit for the grading that exists prior to the development. As you can see, there were slopes from 9.03, 9.02 down to the right-of-way of Sheffield Road. This is the existing topo before the project was started. So during construction, as you've said, there was dirt created during the construction of lot 902 that was pushed downhill and was placed towards the rear of 9.01, which is that grading, which is the main focus of tonight's application. I'm going to move to sheet 2. This now shows the existing topography. When we got the word from the city about the fill and the possible need for the variances, we performed an as-built topo survey in April of this year. Those grades are shown on this plan. It's got a flatter, more modest backyard, and then there's the slope that goes to the northeast off the property towards Route 24, which is on the other side of the sound barrier.
Is that the plan labeled lot development plan 2 of 2?
Yeah, 2 of 3.
I'm sorry, 2 of 3, yes.
So what we did is we took a look at what had been constructed. We did a review of the ordinances. We spoke with the city engineers and the city zoning officer about what would be the next steps. So our goal in looking at this was twofold. Or threefold actually, to identify the variances that would be requested under the amended application, what exists out there, and a proposed solution that would benefit the city by removal of fill in Sheffield Road, but also have the least amount of impact on the backyard of the existing home. There's an existing row of arborvitaes that's there today. Obviously, they'll have to be removed during construction and replaced. We use that, tried to achieve a backyard with similar dimensions. In doing that, we looked at the grades at the property line, and we have a maximum 6-foot wall along that property line. The bottom elevation at the property line under existing pre-development conditions was approximately 101.5. The constructed elevation with the graded slope at the property line varies with the highest point of 110. So there was 8.5 feet of fill proposed. We wanted to have a maximum 6-foot high wall, which is what we've proposed, thus leaving the extra 1.5 feet fill in the right of way, putting a more moderate slope, removing this slope here, removing the dirt, constructing the wall, and reestablishing a backyard for the homeowner. So the biggest thing is we're just going to cut out a wedge of soil and put in a wall. And again, our main objective was to maintain a maximum 6-foot high wall. And I'll note that we do propose a 4-foot high fence on top for a maximum of 10 feet per the zoning in this zone. And then reestablish the lawn and the arborvitae buffer that's there today.
Now, Ms. Muller, may I interrupt you there and ask you this? Does your plan contemplate removal of all of the fill in the Sheffield right-of-way?
No, we are leaving 2 feet of fill, 2.5 feet of fill. So again, the existing pre-development elevation was approximately 101.5. I have the highest elevation at the bottom of wall proposed to be 104. So 2.5 feet, but that is only in the middle one spot shot for the wall to be maintained at a 6-foot height.
Now, if you remove,
and then we tape the pre-existing to the north and to the south.
if you removed all of the fill in Sheffield Road, how high would the retaining wall have to be?
To maintain the moderate slope and minimal impact on the back, it would be the 8.5-foot wall. If we maintained it at 6, we'd have a 3-on-1 slope on top, and that would intrude into the usable backyard by approximately 15 feet.
Now, if you leave any fill in the right-of-way, is that something that requires a license from the governing body?
That's correct. It would need town council approval to leave the fill in the unimproved right-of-way.
All right, now, as a civil engineer, is the proposed plan or a plan which removes all of the fill from the right-of-way of Sheffield Road the best solution to maintaining the grade of the functional rear yard of lot 9.01?
The removal of the fill within Sheffield is not beneficial. As we've said, it was an unused area. The improvements within that right-of-way, I think we can all agree, most likely will never happen. There's no neighbor to that side. It's the sound walls. So leaving fill in that area is not detrimental to that area. We have not had any complaints of runoff during construction from any neighbors that I'm aware of. It's stabilized under its current conditions.
All right, now, Ms. Muller, can you point out with your cursor where the nonconformity in the proposed and developed patio is located?
Yes. So on a side note, when the lot was approved by the board for the minor subdivision, our conceptual improvements anticipated a deck off the back of the house. And I'll show you on the next slide that the home that was constructed is identical to what was approved as part of that application. The main difference was a patio was constructed off the back of the house versus a deck. Stairs were constructed from the garage under to get up to that existing patio. So that patio does encroach into the front yards. I have the 39-foot average line on here. That's about 98 to 100 square feet of encroachment. And then the 35-foot, which is required by zone, that's approximately 35 square feet of encroachment.
All right, now, Ms. Muller, the stairs leading from the garage level up to the patio do not require a variance under the ordinance as per Krista Anderson's review, correct?
That's correct. They're very similar to the stairs that we have in the front yard.
And could you tell the board and members of the interested public where the nonconformity exists and what does that nonconformity face off-site?
It is the eastern corner of the patio where I'm outlining with my hand cursor here. That faces out to the sound wall, which is indicated here, and the other side is Route 24.
So that nonconformity doesn't face any neighbors, does it?
That's correct. I can flip back to my cover sheet, which may give a better overview. Here is the constructed patio behind the home. Here's the here's Sheffield's right-of-way, and then it's a steep embankment down to Route 24. There are no other neighbors in that direction from this property.
Right now, Ms. Muller, do you have plans that demonstrate the originally approved steep slope disturbance and the as-built steep slope disturbance?
Yes, I do. I'll switch to sheet 3 of the plan.
All right, please take the board through that.
So what I've shown here is we did a side-by-side comparison. On the left, these are pre-existing, pre-construction grades The dark line outlined the proposed disturbance at that time. It was approximately 13,300 square feet. And the percentages of slope disturbances are listed in this table in between, and I'll get to that in a second. On the right side of the screen, we have the as-built home, stairs, driveway, and now patio that I spoke about earlier. On the left, this is what was approved by the board at the time. The front steps were relocated from Templar Way down to the new driveway. The home is identical as to what was approved, and the deck was now converted to a patio. So what we did on the plan to the right, we identified the slope disturbances and to identify the variances under what was actually constructed on the site. We indicated the entire property as 100% disturbed, and we quantified those slope disturbances in the chart provided on the sheet. And I can run through these quickly. The slopes were calculated for pre-development as we're going for an amended application. Less than 15% were 4246. Slopes 15 to 17.5 or 7589 square feet. 17.5 to 25% or 3875. And slopes greater than 25%, which is the darkest gray, at 3385. Then we prepared a comparison of the proposed disturbance and the as-built proposed disturbance for which we're asking for relief tonight. Less than 15%, we're going to be 98% disturbed under the approved plan. That's now 100%. All of our proposed disturbances are calculated 100% because we did the limit of disturbance as the property lines. The approved 15 to 17.5% was 88.2. Again, for the whole lot, it's now 100. The slope 17.5 to 25%, we're at 47.8 of the 3,873 square feet, and now we're proposing 100 after the fact. Greater than 25% was the smallest category of the calculated slopes on site at 3,385 square feet. We had approved of 649 square feet, and we're now, after the fact, 100% disturbance, 3,385. We provided these quantitative numbers per the request of your board engineer and the planner. When we go through the slope variances that were already granted, where one was the house had to be greater, was within 10 feet of steep slopes, that variance stays the same. The other variance shall have at least 25% in a non-steep slope. As you can see from the numbers, it didn't comply. That variance has not changed. And the last one is no disturbance of any slopes 15 or greater. That was granted, and now we're asking for an amended variance on that one because we are disturbing more land area, although it's not quantified as a percentage or areas in the ordinance. But we are identifying the fact that this rear area of the property was disturbed. That is now their backyard. The slopes were pushed out, and again, were pushed out on the lot and also pushed out into Sheffield Road to create a usable backyard.
Now, Ms. Buller, are you able, as a civil engineer, to indicate for the board and members of the interested public what impact the additional as-built steep slope disturbance had on stormwater management, sedimentation control, and erosion control?
In my opinion, it had no negative impact. There was no issues during construction, again, that I'm aware of. The area has been stabilized with lawn. It was seeded and hayed when I was out on the site for the slope that was created. It was mostly a beneficial result for the use and the new homeowner of the property.
What is the natural drainage pattern in this area?
It flows across lot 9.01 to the north. It continues towards Route 24, which is situated quite a bit lower than this lot.
And your testimony that the additional steep slope disturbance contemplated by this application had no adverse impact on stormwater flow?
It did not change the drainage areas. It has no impact on the runoff.
Right now, with regard to the steep slopes themselves, are you able, based on your experience with the site during construction, are you able to characterize the steep slopes themselves, which have been disturbed over and above that disturbance originally approved by the original application, which this amends?
Yes, that's the purpose of the steep slope analysis, that we quantify the numbers. Obviously, it was percentages under the existing or the approved plot plan, and it's 100% of what exists on the lot under our proposed conditions or current conditions.
My question was not clear, Ms. Muller. What I'm asking is, can you describe the type of steep slopes that they were and the natural cover that was disturbed?
I wasn't on the site prior, but I believe it was scrubby, weedy trees that got cleared out within the back of portion of this. I unfortunately was not the engineer on the original one. Kevin Page, my old business partner, was. But now they've all been stabilized with lawn, and again, they've been jute matted and seeded to stabilize.
And the administrative reviews, I'd like to turn to the administrative reviews. And before we get into the engineer's review, I want to ask whether or not in your conversations with the applicant, you are authorized to accept as a condition of any approval compliance with the forester's report.
Yes, the forester's report indicates a planting requirement, and I did look at that after we received the comments. The area, what I looked at was the area outside what they used for their backyard, and I delineated that along these arborvitaes. When I measured the limit of disturbance with the additional fill, it's approximately 7,250 square feet beyond those arborvitaes that we would need to plant. And doing the math of his requirement of 100 trees per acre, that would work out to 17 trees proposed to be planted in the Sheffield right-of-way, and we would comply with that recommendation.
All right. And again, in connection with those plantings, given the grade change from the existing functional rear yard, would access have to be secured through the governing body, through the right-of-way of Sheffield Road, and permission to plant those trees in the event that there is an approval be given?
Yes, that's correct. Whichever regrading all the reviewing agencies agree on, whether we take out all but two, whether it's no impact on what's there now, any access for construction and planting will all be within that right-of-way.
All right, now I would like to turn your attention to the civil engineer's report and begin with paragraph number 4 and ask you if you have a comment with regard to that note in his review.
Regarding the fill that was placed in the encroachment into the city right of way,
Yes.
that's a statement of fact.
All right.
I don't disagree with his statement.
All right. How about his paragraph number 6? I believe that you may have addressed this issue in your analysis of the steep slopes, but I want to focus on the engineer's review section number 6 and ask you to comment.
That's correct. That was the table and the summary of steep slope disturbances that were added to sheet 3. The disturbance within the right of way, again, we didn't have pre-construction topo other than the city topo, which didn't show any steep slopes. So encroachment into there wouldn't have aggregated the steep slope disturbance. I don't believe when I look at the city topo, which we show on the first page.
All right. Now, in paragraph number 7, the engineer speaks of the conditions and the material for the proposed retaining walls. And I would ask you if you have addressed his concerns and provided additional datum for that.
Yes, number 7 refers to both some existing retaining walls that were constructed on the site, or mostly the retaining walls that were constructed. There's 2 tiered walls along the property line with the lot 902 to the west. We had gone through a round of as-built topo, which indicated some walls exceeded 4 feet. That was fixed in the field, and spot shots were added to that wall, indicating that it does not exceed 4 feet, nor does the one parallel to Sheffield or the one in the front of the house.
Now, Ms. Muller, just for the record, lot 9.01 is the lot that is the subject of this application. Is it not true that lot 9.02 was previously inspected and approved by the city with comparable retaining walls?
That's correct. And again, these had been inspected previously, and we did topo, and the applicant adjusted the field conditions so that these walls did comply at that time.
All right. Can you offer a comment with regard to paragraph number 10 in the engineer's review with respect to retaining walls in the front yard alongside the driveway?
That's correct. The grading was modified. As I had shown on the last page, we had conceptually drawn a walk out to the road, which is closer in grade. And under the constructed conditions, it goes to the garage under and the driveway. And retaining walls were built in the front yard. Those also do not exceed 4 feet in height.
So that is a compliant condition, correct?
Correct.
How about number 11 in the engineer's report with regard to drainage behind the existing and proposed retaining wall?
The existing drainage, the existing walls do not have drainage behind them. I think the concern here is if you have a footing drain and you're collecting water and then you're concentrating it and discharging it in a different direction. That's not the case for the constructed walls. The proposed wall will be designed after if and when we get board approval. We will provide a lot grading plan. At that time, we'll have construction details for the wall and a full planting plan.
And that would be a condition of approval, correct?
Correct.
All right. With regard to the engineer's comments in paragraph number 12, he talks about grading regrading in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road. What can be said with regard to that observation? What was there
So
any?
this is what I had talked about briefly before. Our proposed plan as presented on these plans to the board tonight do not fully remove all of the fill within the right of way. We looked at the backyard. We used the parameters of maintaining the backyard as much as we could, having a 6-foot high maximum wall, and restoring and removing dirt in Sheffield Road. So it was a balancing act. We're cutting some and sloping some in the backyard. We have the 6-foot wall, and that results in 2.5 feet of fill staying in certain areas of Sheffield Road.
Right. The pre-existing grade of the Sheffield right-of-way was not an even grade throughout that right-of-way, was it?
It was not. It averaged about 100 to 101.5 along the right of way. And we're proposing 103 with a high of 104.
Right. Paragraph 13, I think, is not within the province of the civil engineer. And I would ask you to verify, as requested in paragraph 14, the height of the as-built patio to determine if the patio should be included in building coverage. And I believe that Krista Anderson has addressed that and satisfied the calculation if it were included as being conforming. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do have it in our zoning table. If the entire patio exceeds 1 foot in height, we will still comply with the building coverage. Conservatively, we would be at 13.6, where 18 is allowed.
Right now, in paragraph 15, the review engineer asks the applicant to confirm in testimony that the provided stormwater management improvements will accommodate the increase in impervious coverage as proposed by the application.
The as-built conditions indicate 388 square feet of additional impervious coverage. That was due to the expansion of the front walk and also the inclusion of the rear walks. When we did the plot plan, we always anticipate some deviations from a strict plan that's drawn in my office. And at that time, we included 500 square feet of additional impervious that could run off from the site and still result in no increase. So it would still be compliant with the stormwater management system that was designed.
All right, have you reviewed the comment with regard to the caliper of the trees planted as proposed and as in fact installed?
What's been installed are some arborvitaes. I know he had some comments on that. Tree for tree as to what was required. We're just going to, John Linson is very knowledgeable in this, and we're going to take his guidance as to what needs to be planted.
All right, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the applicant consents in the event of an approval of this application to carrying number 17 specifically as a condition of approval relative to a landscaping plan and John Linson's approval as the city forester of such a plan. With regard, Ms. Muller, to paragraph number 18, and you indicate where the generator is to be located and what plantings there are proposed around that to screen it.
Correct. He noted a generator was installed on the back left corner, the interior lot line of the property. we do show 4 buffer plantings per the city requirements to be provided around it.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the applicant consents in the event of any approval to the items set forth in the engineering review in paragraphs 19 through 24 as conditions of approval. Mr. Chairman, I conclude with the question for Ms. Muller as to whether or not, in your opinion, as a civil engineer, the proposed plan represented by this amendment to the originally approved development plan is superior in every respect.
The main goal of this plan with the 6-foot wall proposed was to remove fill in Sheffield right-of-way. I do not see any detriment to leaving the fill in the right-of-way. We understand that it was not compliant with the approved plans, and we will grade it out as proposed, how the board and their professionals see fit.
All right, I have no further questions of this witness, Mr. Chairman, and would submit her to the examination of the board and members of the interested public.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Any members of the board have questions of this witness? Let's have questions from the board members, then we'll see if there's any questions from the public.
If I could, the picture that you just had up, the drawing, that's what you're proposing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And currently on the site, the stone wall that faces Sheffield starts, and then there's a brief stop, and then it starts again. Is that true about the existing condition of the site at the moment?
The existing wall parallels the driveway. It extends slightly towards Sheffield and stops at the right-of-way, and it also makes a left to form the stairs that go up to the raised patio.
Okay, but is the wall continuous, or is there a break in that wall facing Sheffield?
There's a break in the wall. When there was an inspection done, again, I don't remember the date, that identified some walls above 4 feet in height, which we've corrected. The as-built also indicated a portion of that wall out into the Sheffield right-of-way, and that was removed by the applicant per that inspection.
And this may be a question for another witness, but it sounded in your testimony that there was soil that existed on lot 9.02, and that once that was completed, that soil was moved to lot 9.01. Is that what you testified to?
That's my understanding. There was no imported soil. It was generated by the basements and the construction of the 2 homes.
Okay. And then it seems that the soil then traveled to property owned by the city at some point. Are you aware when that took place, or is that a question for another witness?
As far as the date, I do not know. We did the as-built in April of this year, which indicated that it was over the line.
And so the soil just slowly moved toward the right of way during the course of the construction of 9.02, then 9.01, correct?
Yes, and the applicant can give you more information. I was not on the site during construction.
And is it your testimony that the soil that now exists on city property, should it have to be removed, would then force a larger wall?
That's correct. Again, we proposed a maximum 6-foot high here, which does leave some fill within the right-of-way. There'd be 2 solutions. Either we remove it all and lower the wall, keep it at 6 feet, and then that's detrimental to the usability of the backyard, or we have a higher wall to try and maintain the maximum amount of usable backyard.
And are you aware, as the engineer, at what point the applicant decided to make changes from a deck to a patio, to make changes to the size of the patio, to enlarge the backyard in a way that would be more usable?
We were not on site during construction. We did not receive any calls during construction. We became involved, I think, February, March of this year.
And at what point did you become involved? What took place that you were then involved?
There was inspections and they were going for their TCO or their CO and close out the lot, and inspections were done and this issue was identified.
So it was at the point that it was discovered that there had been changes made in the plans that then created the need for you to be brought in to engineer a new solution?
That's correct. It was identified that it wasn't in compliance with the original approval and that they would have to submit for variance to amend the original proposed approval. And that's when my office got re-involved with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members have questions of this witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can I just follow up on some of Matt's questions?
Absolutely.
So just so that I'm clear, who made the changes from a deck to a patio? Was it the homeowner or was it Mountain Development?
It was done during the course of construction prior to selling it.
Right, but
So
who
it'd be
did
Mountain View,
that?
the applicant during construction.
Okay, so I think that's the thing that Matt was trying to get at, and Matt, I don't want to speak for you, but so somewhere along the line, somebody was out at the site and somebody didn't follow the plans and said, hey, we're not going to build a deck, we're going to build a patio. And as a result of doing that, you now have to come and get the variances in the amended application, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's fine. And all of the plans that are being submitted now and all of the comments from the staff and the compliance. So the only issue I have is how are we going to know that if we approve this, the plans are going to be followed again? Because they weren't followed in the past. And now you're asking us to do things that are affecting the city's land. And so I just, the part that I have is not whether or not what's being asked for now is an issue. The problem I have is what was approved in the past was somehow by somebody just completely disregarded. I mean, I don't know why somebody along the process didn't stop and say, hey, we got approval to build a deck, but we're going to build a patio. Why aren't we going back to the city and asking for permission from the city first and foremost before we build a patio and throw a bunch of fill into the city's right of way and then worry about it later because the property backs up to 24 and the backyard is nicer and all of that. That's the issue I have. It's not whether your solution is okay. I mean, your solution on the surface looks great. But the issue I have is something was approved and somebody somewhere chose to disregard it. And now you're asking the planning board to just say, hey, you know, our bad, we made a mistake. We're going to fix it and make it better. So if we do that, we are now just, does every applicant have the right to come back and say, well, you approved something and I didn't follow it while it was approved. I'm going to come back and ask for an amendment. That's the problem I have.
Mr. Chair, may
So
I?
Andy, that's maybe something better for the conclusion, you know, when we get to the point of listening to all the witnesses. I understand, I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure this witness is the right person to answer those questions, frankly. Maybe the applicant's better.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sheen, yes.
Yes, may I offer an observation with regard to the member's question without in any way prejudging the issue in respect to the deliberations that you've just referenced. And that is that the answer to the fundamental question of how can you be assured that any approval that you grant will be the construction in the field is that the Department of Community Services currently has issued a temporary CO. They will not convert that temporary CO into a permanent CO until all of the work required as a result of these deliberations is completed.
Okay, all right, I hear that. Thank you. Any other members of the board have questions of this witness and her testimony specifically? And I'm assuming, I know Mr. Sheehan is keeping track of this. I imagine our council is keeping track of it too. There were a number of what I'll say C of A's in that sense of, you agreeing on behalf of the applicant to agree with the comments by the engineer. So I know we're keeping track of all those. Any other questions, I'm sorry, from the board members of this witness? All right, any questions from members of the public of this witness? And I also want to give our consultants an opportunity to ask any questions of the witness, but let's see if we have any applicants, any members of the public have any questions of this witness. No members of the public. Any members of our consultant team, Mr. Dorr, or I don't know whether it's Joe or Tom that's attending tonight for Burgess, have any questions of this witness?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions, if I may.
Sure, Chris.
So the retaining wall that's proposed to be installed up to 6 feet high, why was it not extended all the way to the far northwest lot line to capture more of that fill or be able to restore more of the right-of-way?
We had drawn this. I did have a few conversations with the city engineers department. We could extend it, and then I would have to, basically cut it back into the right-of-way to not have the wall extend into the right-of-way. We could extend it slightly, but I believe that knob was already there before this one started. As a condition of approval, if we need to extend the wall another 20 feet and still give me room to grade it out without going on to lot 902, we can certainly agree to that.
So, and then there was a comment about the fill material and I don't know if this is a question for the engineer or for the applicant, was the fill material that was brought onto the right of way, was that only from the excavations of the property next door, or was it material brought from off-site?
The applicant can confirm where it came from during construction. From my understanding, it was all generated on site, and he'll confirm that.
Okay, because the only concern would be that if the city does not know where that soil came from, the quality of that soil could be in question. And at that point, there would have to be some testing done to determine that it would be acceptable.
Right.
The other question I had was if they were to build it, restore the right of way down to the 100 feet or 101 feet, whatever it was originally, and then put in that 6 foot high wall as proposed, you're saying that the property would be unusable. I guess my question to you is, would that include steep slopes on that now regraded property, or is it what makes it unusable? I mean, most of us, I believe the steep slopes would make it unusable, but there's nothing to indicate that would be a steep slope condition if that were the case.
So if we dropped it down the 2.5 feet, I would then have a 3-on-1 grade, which is 33% at the top of the wall. Right now I have that for approximate 6 feet. That would add another 8.5 feet, 8 feet of 3-on-1 slope to their rear yard to catch that 2.5 feet.
But it would still leave a large portion of that backyard as usable, correct?
It would be 15 feet less, but they would still have some usable area, yes.
Right, and the original plan didn't contemplate all of this fill. So there was probably not that much of a usable, there was probably steep slopes involved as well, correct?
Correct, it would slope under what would have been a proposed deck. And then they could come back and put in walls as the homeowner.
And that's about the time that they decided to put a patio in versus a deck, I assume.
I can't answer to that.
Okay, I mean, I assume that if the board were to decide to approve this, and the council were to then deny the additional fill in the right of way, then they would have to come back to the board and, or go back to the original plan.
We would have to come up with a different solution, possibly tiered walls. It may adjust, it would not change the slope variances that we're asking for tonight. It may change the variances associated with the proposed wall that we're seeking tonight.
So tiered walls then would be an option.
If we backed them into the property, yes. If I went higher than 6 feet, then I would tier the walls.
Okay. And I guess the other questions that we had related to because the original area was not disturbed at all, so there was significant vegetation that was removed. So, and we would defer obviously to the city forester for his re-landscaping of that area. And Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's all the questions I have.
Bill, may I follow up on that line of questioning, Bill?
Bill, you're on mute.
You're muted, Bill.
Sorry, guys. Go ahead, Jay. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking at the site plan as well here, and thinking about a tiered wall. Those of us who were involved in a recent application had loads of hours of discussing tiered walls. That to me came to mind. I didn't quite know how to pose it as a question, but as it's now been brought up, sounds like it could have interest. The other thing that sounds like it could, as I look at the site plan to the north where this comes to a point, you've got a large area there that has relatively shallow slopes, not steep slopes. Could that not be better utilized to accomplish, or maybe the combination of those two, to accomplish, to not require the soil in the right of way? Again, my goal being, how can we get that soil and yet still allow the homeowner to have a usable yard? There's an awful lot of space there that could perhaps be, maybe at a greater expense, I don't know, but could accommodate that soil. And using a tiered wall, is that not a combination of events that gets you out of the city right of way?
The point up at the northern corner, I'm meeting all the steep slopes that exist in Sheffield Way and on the property. So we couldn't flatten those out, and it would just come to a point and not add much usable area. There wouldn't be much, I guess, bang for the buck of installing all the walls to flatten out a little point there. So what we did is we blended the wall into meet the existing grade, the steep slopes that are adjacent and in Sheffield Way by that point. And I just wanted to, we're talking about a 6-foot wall. The portion that's 6 feet is really only about where we have the 35-foot front yard dimension on our plan. This wall ranges from 0 up to a highest point of 6 feet. We're not proposing 6 feet along the entire wall, just estimating, and I have a reduced copy here with me at home. And we come up to a point, so maybe 10 to 20 feet maximum on that wall that's going to be a 6 foot in height. And then we taper it down to meet the grade as we go towards Templar and we go towards the north. It's only a small section that's at 6 feet max.
Okay. Well, again, I think what some of us are trying to get at here is, well, at least I'll speak for myself, trying to get at is not getting involved with this issue of going to council for a request that I think they're going to find puzzling. In my opinion, if I were one of them, I'd say, figure it out. So I'm trying to help. And if it is only a portion that's 6 feet, can't we address that some way? And again, just trying to be practical here, to rather than dealing with potentially, as was mentioned a moment ago, some testing. Where'd that so? Do you really want to go there? It seems to me there are on-site solutions here that might be achievable.
Thanks, Jay. Anyone else from the board Sorry, I was looking for Tom or Joe from Burgess, if they had any comments. Hi, Joe, there you are.
I just want clarification on one thing. You're intruding into the steep slopes from the original approval to this proposal by about, what, 6,200 square feet. And you had indicated that the end result is a much more usable rear yard. You have figures indicating how much of the rear yard under the initial approval was usable in contrast to how much you're gaining as usable space by virtue of these intrusions.
I did not quantify what was usable off the back of the property. We did have one flat area, and I did not calculate between that limited disturbance and basically what I call the row of arborvitaes really defines their lawn and usable area. I didn't calculate that number in between.
Would you agree as a significant enhancement of the usable portion for their personal use?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
May I follow up on Mr. Brinkerhoff's question with a question for Ms. Muller?
Sure, Council, of course.
Thank you. Ms. Muller, as Mr. Brinkerhoff indicated, if this board required the full removal of the fill that's currently being placed in, that is currently placed in the right-of-way of Sheffield, you would require a higher wall, approximately 8.5 feet high, for a short period of distance, correct?
That's correct.
So could you indicate on the plan, please, where the wall would be 8.5 feet high and indicate how it would taper to the south and to the north?
Sure. Let me just share my screen again here. So this is sheet 2 of 3 that we were looking at before. Let me just zoom in here.
Exhibit A1.
And I'll start from the southern, I'll call it southern end, and work up towards the point. We have a 1 foot wall indicated, a 3 foot wall, a 6 foot wall, 6 foot wall, 6 foot wall, 5 foot wall. So it's between these 3 spot shots. I said about 20 feet, more like 40 to 50 feet. I apologize. I have a small plan here in front of me at home. So it would just be between these 3 spot shots, top of wall 109, bottom 103, top of wall 109, bottom 103. That would be the 6 feet in height. And then step down as we go to the north and south.
And there would be arborvitae or green giants planted in front of that, correct?
The intention was, if the board does approve the application, we'll do a full submission of a lot grading plan. There's an established row of arborvitaes that defines their backyard that I'm following with my plan. The intention would be to remove those during the temporary construction and then reestablish those arborvitaes at the top of the wall. And then the plantings in the right-of-way would be per the forester's recommendation. By calculation, it'd be 17 trees. He indicated maybe some understory trees, but we would work with him in the right-of-way.
Thank you. But so the arborvitae that you would, or the green giants that you'd be replacing, would you agree to replace them with arborvitae that are above 8 feet in order to block the wall, or to block, in fact, over the height of the full fence, of the full wall?
We're actually on top of the wall. So where they're planted now is just a view blocker for the homeowner.
So they're going on top of that 8 foot wall? Is that?
That's correct. That's correct. Sheffield is lower than our backyard.
Okay, my apologies.
Now, does that address, excuse me, Ms. Muller, if you did that and created the 8.5-foot wall for that 20-foot stretch, plus or minus, you would be able to remove all of the fill from the right-of-way of Sheffield Road, correct?
That's correct.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, in my introductory remarks, it was my intention to preserve the flexibility of the board in deliberations by saying, if you decide to remove all of the fill in Sheffield Road, the applicant can do that and would consent to it, but would require a slightly higher variance for the wall. I
Right.
don't think that that variance would have any impact on anyone, given its location. If, on the other hand, the board felt that the better plan was to leave either some or all of the fill in Sheffield, that the applicant would be willing to make that request of council, but it would unduly extend these proceedings. And in my opinion, subject to Mr. Warner's greater experience and wisdom, it would seem to me that it would be better to carry the application and wait for council, or rather than create it as a condition of approval, which might require the necessity of coming back. If council rejected it, then the plan would be to remove it, create the 8.5-foot wall. If council approved it, then the board would be given the opportunity of incorporating council's judgment in its deliberations as to how to address the amended site plan request. If, on the other hand, the board says, no, we think that it is in the interest of the public good to have all of the fill removed, that's something that the applicant is willing to acknowledge.
Mhm.
Chairman
Okay.
Anderson, may I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Sure, man.
You were testifying on Mr. Sheehan's question regarding what the wall would look like if all the fill was removed and it would reach 8 feet in a certain area, correct?
8.5, yeah.
Okay. Can you show us what the wall was originally intended to be in its approved conditions on its first approval? Because the 8.5-foot wall, as I understand, which has been testified, is the consequence of extending the yard. So before we even get
That's
into
correct.
the solution about whether council should opine or not, I think we're just still trying to understand what was approved, and then now with the fill gone or not, what we're dealing with. So could you just show us, do you mind, what the original wall was to look like in the approved plan? And what the heights were?
Sure. So this is the left exhibit on sheet 3, which shows a 4-foot wall adjacent to the driveway. That 4-foot wall was still constructed in the similar location adjacent to the driveway. And an additional wall was added to the east-west. And then this slopes up along the steps to the rear yard.
So it's the additional wall that is now being proposed at 8.5 feet?
No, tonight's proposal to remove the fill, it's basically going to cut out the triangle of fill within the right-of-way and
No.
maintain the grades the best we can along the right-of-way with the wall.
I understand, but I guess you had mentioned a 4-foot wall. And then you also referenced a second wall, correct?
So you to answer the question of what was approved
Yes.
is the plan on the left.
Okay, so there was no secondary wall that
Yeah, there
Mr.
was
Sheehan is
one
referring
four-
to that now has to reach 8.5 feet in order to address the fill issue, correct?
Well, it's two parts. One, there was a 4-foot wall here that was going to wrap around. It's a garage under house. And it would slope up naturally behind. Under construction, and this is the existing conditions, this gray wall here was constructed.
Mhm.
And this turn on the wall was also just extended and blended into the steps that go up. Those are constructed walls. If you go out there today, you'll see those out there. They blend into the hardscape for the steps up to the patio. There's a darker wall here, which I apologize, a little hard to see along the dark right of way with the slopes here. This darker wall is our proposed solution to remove fill in Sheffield Red.
Because of decisions made during construction.
And again, the applicant can discuss the field conditions when he's up next.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So any other questions from the board members?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple if no other board members
Sure,
or board
please.
professionals
Yeah,
have.
Mr. Warner, please go. I didn't see that we had any questions from the public. So yeah, sure.
Thank-
Mr. Warner, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Muller, if we can go to your sheet 3 of 3, the slope disturbance plan.
Do you want me to share it up on the screen?
If you don't mind, real quick.
Sure.
And here we go. We had the calculations there. If you can enlarge the calculations a bit, am I correct that the as-built disturbance is approximately 6,200 square feet more than the approved disturbance, a steep slope disturbance, or I should say slope disturbance? It includes less than 15% as well, but the vast majority of the additional slope disturbance is in the steep slope categories, correct?
That's correct. The additional limit of disturbance approved was 13,359 and proposed the whole lot area of 9,093. So that works out to be 5,734.
Right, okay. Just shy of 6,000 square feet more and almost a 50% increase in the slope disturbance from what was approved, correct?
Correct. Again, I was looking at the limit of disturbance, which the majority of the lot is steep slopes, so we just simplified it to just the limit of disturbance and then broke it down into the slope categories.
And while this is not a question for you, we did skip item number 13 in the engineer's June 23 report, recognizing that the settlement agreement with the objectors in the prior proceeding was a part of the approval and also included, the approval also included, if I recall correctly, the attachment of an incorporation by reference of the settlement agreement with the prior objectors. I guess just a couple of quick points for hopefully the benefit of the board. One, we don't get involved in private party issues, but when we are considering an approval, like with the prior approval that the board considered, members of the public weighed in at that time. They've been noticed. They may weigh in this evening. But in some way, shape, or form, Mr. Sheehan, we should be recognizing that the prior approval that you are seeking to amend included a settlement agreement. So it's going to have to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, even if it is just carried forward. And maybe someone's going to have to speak to the extent to which, if at all, what's being proposed runs counter to any portion of that settlement agreement.
You know, Mr. Warner, I agree with you that the original resolution incorporated as an exhibit, not by reference, but as an exhibit, the agreement entered into among the objecting neighbors and the developer. And the developer will testify that to date, there have been no complaints either during construction nor, at least to my knowledge, as a result of this pending application. In fact, I believe that Ms. Muller may have had conversations with one of the adjoining neighbors who was a member of that objecting consortium, who commented on the existing development. Kathy, can you make that comment available to the board?
So we're working on a site plan for an adjacent neighbor that we had worked on in the past. We put in a patio and we're doing some more stuff for them. When I spoke to her, she didn't express any discontent for the development or any concerns or drainage concerns, because we did a full topo on her lot. They're actually at the end of Wentworth. They're on Wentworth at the end of Templar.
Yeah, I can state, Mr. Warner, that I read the settlement agreement carefully, and I do not believe that there have been any violations of that agreement by the developer.
And that's fine and good. Just from a factual standpoint, is what is being proposed by the applicant, does it in any way, shape, or form modify that settlement agreement which was referenced in and attached to the resolution of approval of this board previously?
I do not believe it does, with the possible exception of the corner patio variance, only in the sense that it creates a new condition in the front yard of the Sheffield right-of-way. But as I said before, that corner faces the unimproved Sheffield right-of-way. It is not visible from any point in the front yard of Sheffield. And to the extent that there might be visibility of, it would be from the second floor windows of the house across Templar Way, probably 125 or more feet away. And that view can easily be screened by columnar or evergreen trees, which would be part of the planting plan proposed and approved by the forester. So the answer to your question is no, it does not violate it. It will not violate it. It will have absolutely no impact on any adjoining neighbor for any reason or at any point.
Right. I appreciate the arguments as to why the amendment, in your opinion, should be granted by the board. But as a factual matter, to the extent it might, the reason I asked is very simple. It's just a factual issue. If it would require any change whatsoever, any impact on the settlement agreement, then this board's approval is being amended in that fashion. You've noticed the neighboring objectors, so they're here to speak to it. So I think due process is there. That's not the issue. It's just a factual matter. I wanted just a concise clarification as to what, if anything, is amended by way of from the settlement agreement to by way of the proposal, just so we can have a resolution of memorialization. If there is an approval, accurately reflect it. But we could circle back on that. I hear you as to what might be a one modification, the front yard setback from Sheffield as to the patio. So I have nothing further at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Warner. No more comments from the board, the public, the board's consultants, or our counsel of this witness.
I do
At
have
this
one more
point,
question.
is there someone speaking?
Joe Burgess.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Just one more question, and I know there's a lot of focus.
Did we cut you off, Joe? I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Did you get cut off somewhere? I apologize.
I did, yes, but here I am.
I'm sorry.
There's been a lot of focus on the retaining wall issue and the height of the retaining wall. We do have this variance for the patio. Now, in looking at sheets 3 of 3 in your exhibit, it's pretty obvious that the patio is much larger than the deck that had previously been approved.
Right.
And while I can appreciate what Mr. Sheehan said about the patio, and what he said really goes to the heart of one prong of the negative criteria of the statute, but it doesn't address the issue of physical features and what physical features affect the ability to have complied to code with that patio. And maybe you could address that, Ms. Mueller.
I didn't quite follow the question. The patio and the stairs area is approximately 500 square feet. It's compliant on the site with all impervious coverage improvements. We're not asking for any variance for coverage. Even if it is raised and included in the building coverage, it does not violate the zoning. It's purely because of the Sheffield right-of-way. If this was not a front yard, it would have complying setbacks.
But
So it
technically
was
it is a front yard.
constructed.
I'm sorry, you're speaking over one another.
I said, but technically it is a front yard, and it's not the coverage issue that's at stake, it's the setback to the front line of the property along that right of way. So
That's correct. And Mr. Sheen had stated some of the planning proofs. I am not a licensed planner. I can only speak to the zoning and the engineering.
Yeah, Ms. Mueller, if I may, in regard to Mr. Burgess's question, can I ask you this question? Is the patio a permitted accessory structure under the ordinance?
Yes, it is.
All right. If the patio corner were chamfered to comply by eliminating basically 100 feet of that corner, would it diminish the aesthetics and utility of the patio?
Yes, it would be an irregular shaped patio, which would be, a result of a irregularly shaped lot. It's triangular, it's got 2 front yards, and on that side, it's an unimproved right of way.
And if it were chamfered, would there be any realized benefit other than the compliance with the front yard setback from the unimproved and unlikely to be improved right-of-way of Sheffield?
In my opinion, no.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? Mr. Chairman, may I? Ms. Mueller and Mr.
Matthew,
Sheen.
I just want to be sure that Joe is finished.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Joe, are you you heard the witnesses' answers? Did you want to follow up on that?
now that answer, I'll let the board decide whether that meets the statutory burden or not, and I'll yield the floor to Mr. Delory.
Okay, Matthew, sorry. Thanks.
Okay,
Joe.
and my apologies, Mr. Burgess. Ms. Miller, are you aware of any plans the city has for the right of way?
I am not.
Mr. Sheehan, are you aware of any plans the city has for the right of way?
The answer to your question, sir, is that I am not aware beyond the statement in the prior resolution of approval by this board that the right-of-way has been in that condition for over 60 years, and the resolution itself describes any improvement of that right-of-way as unlikely.
And how many years had the lot sat in its condition before it was developed?
Over 60.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Laurie. We're at this point, Counselor, we would like to have your next witness, but we have a court reporter here, Bridget, who probably, it's 9:30 now roughly. We've been at this for approximately 2 hours. Bridget, would you benefit from a 10-minute break?
Yes, I would.
Okay, why don't we reconvene? Let's just say now it's 9:30. Let's reconvene at 9:40. Thank you all. So I have to ask you, Bridget, are you on the space station orbiting the planet?
I am. I didn't get a chance to tidy up too much today, so I'm feeling embarrassed. So yeah.
Oh, well, no, I think it's a very cool
Thank you.
cool background. I kind of like it, and I just thought maybe
Yes,
you
I'm
were
not going to
just
be
working.
paying millions and billions of dollars to get my ticket to go into space.
Okay,
but-
so you're not on Virgin or
Nope,
any
not
of those,
getting Ashton
spaceships.
Kutcher's ticket either. I don't think so.
Bridget, don't feel bad. I didn't tidy up either. That's why I'm in San Francisco. So, you're entitled. And the Bezo Express is not at my place either.
Yeah, that's not. I even if I could, I wouldn't. I'm just not that. I don't know. That freaks me out.
I don't know if I went to the moon, I may not come back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I like my grandbabies. I'm going to keep them.
Yeah, they can come visit.
I didn't realize that was Brit.
Yeah, there she is.
Mhm. I'm standing up. That's why.
So I forget who it was that said one giant leap for a billionaire, one small step for mankind. The comment that that a Brit had for this extravaganza going on here in our country. Thought it was pretty clever.
I'm more impressed with all the books that Joe Burris has. I want to know if he's actually read them all, or he's just, is that a background with how smart he is?
Every single one.
Every single one. I think I've read 5 books in my whole life, Joe. You've got more in your library than I've ever read in my entire life.
You look like one of those guys that are interviewed on the news when they always have all the books.
Right.
Yeah. Walter Cronkite, like in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, I thought
You would
Joe was in
expect
Paris.
Steve to be in
Wasn't he
the
back, Joe?
corporate library. They don't have him anymore, Steve. There's no more corporate libraries.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, when we start, I just have a general question as we proceed.
All right. Okay. I think we're getting ready to start here pretty soon. Let's see.
My take on this.
Chris, hey, Rich, Chris needs to do a roll call.
Oh,
first, and then
sorry.
Yeah.
We have to know you. We have to officially know you're here, Rich, before you speak.
That's right.
Correct.
Who knows
So,
where Rich is? Who knows where he is? There's Chris. Okay. How
There,
we doing
Chris.
with,
Chris, the
roll
man
call?
of no typos.
Once in a
Yeah.
while, Andy. Chairman Anderson, are you here?
Brett, present, yes.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Here.
Councilmember Little,
Here.
Ms. McNeil,
Here.
Mr. Delory,
Here,
Mr. Perrella,
Here.
Mr. Fiore,
Here.
Mr. Formicelli,
Here.
and Mr. Warner is
Here.
here.
Okay. So Rich, why don't you ask your question, then we'll let Mr. Sheehan proceed with his second witness.
I just have a general question, and then I would just like guidance as to who to direct this to. But, you know, essentially, we're being asked to pursue a solution to something for the fact that what was agreed upon was not followed. So how did we get here? And I'd like to know that. And because my concern is that approving this sets a dangerous precedent for the board. If we've approved something and then it's not followed, and now we're going around a second time, I have real concerns about that.
I think that's something Mr. Warner can address too, and I think the applicant's going to address that, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the member's concern, it's a concern that is well recognized, and the mere fact that the plan originally approved was not followed does not preclude the board from making an assessment as to whether or not the requested relief in the amendment is something that is beyond the scope of the board's consideration. And it has to, as Mr. Warner will instruct, it has to reflect a plan that satisfies the statutory criteria, which in simple terms can be translated as to answering the question as to whether or not the plan that is proposed in the amendment is in effect a better plan than the one that was approved, or that it is a plan which in balance outweighs any detriment that might arguably flow from it. And I think
If it's a
that
better plan, why was it not presented initially?
I beg your pardon?
If it's a better plan, why was it not presented initially to the board?
I think the answer to that will be in the testimony of the next witness. The developer is going to testify next, and he has to answer that question.
And can we speak to how this all occurred and what was the decision point in making that patio, which was not approved?
Sure.
Most assuredly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mr. Sheen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, in regard to the prior question by the board member asking about how this board can be assured that a plan approved by it will be constructed, there is a fact that is a part of the temporary certificate of occupancy that must be incorporated into this record and be a part of any concern and deliberation that the board may have. And it is that, in addition to the requirement for the amended application, the developer was required to post a bond of $50,000 in cash to satisfy any requirements that might flow from the deliberations of this board, consideration of the application for an amended site plan. It is not a credit bond which permits the developer to access it for costs incurred. It is a bond that is a performance bond which requires performance before it's released, so that in addition to the TCO, the current homeowner, the Department of Community Services, there is a $50,000 performance bond currently posted with the department that, currently posted. I'm not sure whether it's with the department or with the applicants, with the homeowner's attorney, but I believe it's with the department that stands in support of the requirement to perform under any approval that this board might grant. So having said that, I would ask if there are any questions of me. And before I call Mr. Yassin, I want to ask Kathy Muller one more point of clarification for the board with regard to the proposed wall at 8.5 feet or 6 feet, whichever one is the one required.
Mr. Sheehan, can I interrupt you for a second? Because I'm the one that made the comment about what you just addressed with the bond and all of that. And listen, I appreciate Ms. Muller's testimony, and I appreciate that the developer is going to come in and address the issue. And so my concern, and I think Mr. Fiore's concern, if I hear him correctly, is not whether or not a bond was posted and a temporary CO was posted. We're all well aware of the approval process in the city. We've been doing this for a long time. I think the underlying question that we have and the concern that we have is somebody chose to make a decision to build a patio and not a deck. And if the approval process were to be followed properly, regardless of whether a $50,000 bond was posted or not, somebody in the field, somebody along the process of construction chose to change the approved plans without first going to the city and asking for an amended plan. And now here we are, to Mr. Fiore's point, we're being asked, and whether it's legally, whatever, we're being asked to approve a solution to an on-field failure. That's the issue that we're struggling with. And the issue that I have, and I think Mr. Fiore has, is I think that sends a very, very dangerous precedent that you can just decide somebody along the line can go out in the field of construction and arbitrarily take a deck and make a patio and go fill it in and build a wall and put untested soil on the city's property. And then just expect us to conditionally approve it, and to Jay's point and to your statement, councilmatically approve it. Because I think the council would have a massive problem. And to Mr. Delory's point, I don't think anybody on this board has the right to determine what happens on the unimproved Sheffield. That's not our choice, and it doesn't matter how long it's sat there undeveloped. I don't know the plan for it. You don't know the plan for it. The city of Summit will figure that out. But I can certainly tell you this, as a Summit resident, I'm not so happy that you threw soil in the city's right of way and nobody tested it. So I have a problem, Mr. Fiore has a problem, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, that somebody from this developer made a decision in the field of construction to ignore the plans and now wants us to approve a solution to it. And I'd like to know who did that and why we should believe that your solution to the first failure we should rely on is going to be carried out in the proper manner. That's all we're getting to. This is a very dangerous precedent that this board will approve stuff and somebody can ignore it, come back to us later and say, woe is me, I made a mistake.
Well, I think the answer to your observation, your two observations, is one, how did this happen? You're going to get a chance to hear that from the developer. And number two, with regard to the fill in the right of way, you will hear the developer consent to a precondition or a condition of approval that will remove all of the fill in the right of way and ask for an increased height of the retaining wall in the 20-foot distance to 8.5 feet. And the final thing is that the soil in the right of way, as the developer will testify, is the soil that was existing on the site for time immemorial. It's not any off-site fill that was brought in.
So, Mr. Sheehan, that's all well and good, but the developer agreed to follow the plan that was approved previously and chose not to. Is that a fair statement? It's a simple yes or no. Did the developer have an approved plan and chose not to follow it?
He had an approved plan and he did not follow it.
Okay, so that's our point. So the point is we as a planning board are going to set a very dangerous precedent that people are going to approve our resolutions and then choose not to follow them and then come back to us later and say, hey, you know, I could get more money for this, or I got a better backyard and I built a patio instead of a deck.
Yeah, number one,
Let's go
the
to,
patio is a permitted accessory use. It's not the patio that's the problem. It's the corner of the patio. 100 square feet of that patio, according to Krista Anderson, is the only element of the patio that is non-conforming.
And to Mr. Fiore's point, it should have been asked for to begin with. If this is a better solution, why wasn't it asked for?
I agree with that, and that is the fault. But to your point of this being a precedent, Mr. Warner will give you wise advice from a legal perspective that each case stands on its own and it does not establish a precedent. In fact, that is the law. And if this plan is an approvable plan objectively, which would have been approved if he came in before he built it out, it is something that is established by the law and by the standards established in that law that you must adhere to and be assured that what you do tonight does not establish any legal precedent for what you may do tomorrow.
let's
Is that true,
let's
Mr.
move
Warner?
on to your next witness. Andy, come on. Time's up. Let's move
Time
on to
to
the
move
next
on.
witness from
Time's
the
up.
applicant. Time's up. I just said it was time is up. So let's go on to the next applicant. We understand the point that you're trying to make. It's very clear, and I don't think anybody's arguing with you. So I think it's time to move on to the next witness and complete this application tonight.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Dean testifies, I would like to ask Kathy Muller one clarifying question.
Sure, go ahead. Yep.
Ms. Muller,
Yes.
if the wall is 6 feet or if the wall is 8 feet, are you elevating any portion of the existing rear yard of the homeowner by creating that wall?
No, under both proposals, we're actually lowering a portion of their yard and grading down. The top of the wall will remain at the same elevation as proposed on the plans that were submitted. The bottom of the wall would get lower at the right of way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that clarifying question, I would be prepared to have Mr. Ozzie Yassine admitted to the platform and sworn for the purpose of giving testimony in this matter.
Right. Mr. Chairman, if I may, he's already been sworn, but I defer to the chair. But we do have Mr. Santori who's attempting to weigh in on something, and it might have to do with something that Mr. Sheehan represented earlier, I don't know.
It does, and just, Mr. Warner, obviously, you and I have worked
But,
together.
wait 1 minute, Mr. Santori. So at the chair's pleasure, would the chair recognize Mr. Santori?
I'm sorry, Mr. Santori, who do you represent? I'm sorry.
I represent Mr. Yassine and the entities, and I'm fully familiar with the facts of this particular genesis. And having worked with,
I have no problem with you weighing in at this point. It sounds like
yeah,
it's a
I
good
just
point
want to give some quick, accurate facts for Mr. Warner for any resolution reference, because Mr. Warner and I work a lot together.
Excuse me, Mr. Santori, you're going to need to slow down.
Sure, no problem. I can try. Can't always promise, but I can try.
I'll just keep interrupting.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, go ahead.
The escrow amount, Mr. Warner, was $47,641, and it was placed with the city of Summit. Okay, that's just for accuracy purposes.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Santori?
We appreciate facts. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Okay, great. Back to Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Yassine, having previously been sworn, is prepared to give testimony in this matter, Mr. Chairman. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Yassine, what is your position in regard to the applicant?
I'm the principal of Mountain View Developments.
And how long have you been in the development of real estate?
I would say about 29 years.
Right. And you are intimately familiar with the development of 74 Templar Way, lot 9.01?
Yes.
Could you please testify and tell the board the sequence of construction and focus on how the additional steep slopes were disturbed and how a condition involving the substitution of the deck with a patio that has a non-conforming corner of approximately 100 square feet, plus or minus, occurred.
Okay. So we started construction on lot 902 before not lot 901. When we excavated the foundation, there was a lot of soil left, and we moved it over to lot 901. And once we start lot 901 foundation, we did excavation and we put all the dirt, we piled the dirt in the backyard. And once we piled dirt in the backyard, the foundation went up, we start to backfill, and once we start to backfill with the dozer and the machine and everything is going on, we said, by flattening the backyard was going to be a better backyard, a more usable backyard. So that's how we decided to just flatten the backyard. We use the same soil that was on site from lot 901 to backfill or flatten the backyard. And we disturbed, of course, the steep slope when that happened. As far as the patio, I didn't think was any difference between a deck or a patio. I thought the deck will be more maintenance, so I decided to do a patio rather than a deck for maintenance free. It just looks better, it lasts longer, and I really, honestly, I did not know I was over on the lot, the setbacks, the front yard setback. I didn't even know it was actually a front yard setback from Sheffield, since I thought it was like abandoned road. It was never used for over 60 years. So I didn't know that that corner or expanding the patio was going to be a front yard setback. I always thought it's a rear yard. So I've done many towns, I've done patios versus decks. It just, again, it's maintenance free, it looks better, it lasts longer. And that's how we did the patio, and we went over with the setback. I didn't know until Krista Anderson raised that up, which is a couple months ago.
Right now, Mr. Yassine, let's go back to the construction sequence.
Yes.
Your testimony that when you began construction at the subdivided lots, you began with the interior lot 9.02. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you moved soil to establish grade on that lot, where was the soil from that lot stored?
From lot 902, it was stored in lot 901.
Right, and when you established the grade on lot 902 and turned to lot 901, what did you do with the soil that was stored on 901 from 902?
We flattened the soil into the whole backyard.
And how did the excess soil wind up in the right of way of Sheffield Road?
Just when you're in construction and you get machines and dozers and and excavators working there, this can easily get out of hand very quickly. I mean, people are just pushing dirt around, and they went over the steep slope in the right of way. It was just like, again, the machine is working all day. Sometimes I leave for a few hours, I come back, the soil is really there. So we weren't really paying too much attention to it, just to be clear. We're just focusing on doing a decent, usable backyard.
When the grade was established for the usable backyard on lot 901, was the soil spread into the right of way to stabilize that backyard, or was it just thrown in there?
No, it was to stabilize it. I'm sorry, it was to stabilize the backyard.
And in fact, did it achieve that objective?
Yes.
All right, with regard to the patio, if you were to address, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Yassim, I got ahead of myself. Does the applicant, Mr. Yassim, agree to amend its application to remove all of the soil that has been spread into the right-of-way of undeveloped Sheffield Road and request a larger wall variance for the 20 plus or minus feet, from 6 feet to 8.5 feet?
Yes, I would agree to that.
All right.
I'm sorry, if I could interrupt for a minute, Mr. Chairman, with your permission. Mr. Sheehan, I thought I heard Ms. Muller testify earlier that it's at 6 feet tall for a stretch of about 40 to 50 feet when she corrected herself earlier. So I would imagine, but please correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Muller, that if the option with the 8.5 foot tall retaining wall, it would not be a stretch for 20 feet, but I suspect it might be a stretch for that same 40 to 50 feet. Would that be accurate?
That's correct. We'll do our best to minimize the length of wall at 8 feet tall, 8.5 feet tall. But yes, when I relooked at the grades, it would be 40 to 50 feet that we have proposed at 6.
Right. And as I said before, facts are very important. They're not opinions. There's two different things. And one's objective, one's subject. And the board needs to have the right facts in front of it, particularly for a resolution memorializing a grant or a denial, whatever it is. But it's important that they have the facts in front of them. So thank you for clarifying the magnitude of the deviation in option 2 or B, 8.5 feet tall for a stretch of quote unquote 40 to 50 feet. I'm sorry for the interruption. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Warner. I appreciate it. And I apologize with the assurances that I did not intend to mislead the board in it.
Didn't mean to suggest otherwise.
Thank you. All right, now, Mr. Yassin, with regard to the patio, if the application for variance relief to permit the continued existence of the patio in the right-of-way of Sheffield Road, the undeveloped portion of Sheffield Road, were denied, could you bring the patio into compliance by champering off the corner to achieve that objective?
I can do that. I'm not sure the purpose of how it's going to harm anybody, but it's going to be on a different shaped patio. All we're going to do is just clip the corner, and it's not going to be as useful as the wood as is right now. But it could be done. I don't think it's necessary to do that. But that's up to the board, of course.
As a developer, would you consider that?
Sheehan, can I just clarify, Mr. Sheehan, I think you may have misspoke, or maybe I don't quite understand. You said something to the effect that the corner of the patio was in the Sheffield Road right away. I don't think that's correct.
In the front yard setback of the Sheffield right away.
Yeah. I think you said right away, but I may be wrong about that. I just want to clarify.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman. It is in the front yard setback of the Sheffield Road right of way, Mr. Yassine. If you chamfered off the corner, other than bringing it into compliance, technical compliance with the required front yard setback for an undeveloped and unlikely to be developed street, could you see any positive aspect to champering off that corner from a developer's perspective?
I don't.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would submit Mr. Yassine to the examination of the board and members of the interested public.
Mr. Chair, I think you're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Any members of the board have questions for Mr. Yassine in regarding his testimony?
I would just make a comment. I wish that he had spoken first, because in hearing his testimony, it seemed like an honest mistake was made. There wasn't an intent to deceive here, based on that testimony. I wish we had heard that initially, just to understand where the genesis of this occurred.
I have questions.
Yeah, Matthew, yep.
Sure. So you testified that the soil in the humdrum of construction ended up in the right of way. In your 29 years, has any soil on a property you're developing ended up on someone else's property?
No, I never really done a project where there is a right of way that's an abandoned right of way. So I never experienced that.
Okay. And have you ever done a project where you made changes to it that you felt it was unnecessary to go to the town to revise or to understand, especially in a setting where there was a resolution with said conditions?
I've done minor changes, very little that doesn't impact. It's just more of a drainage. I always worry about water issues in any house I build. So I always make the best decision at that time to make sure the water is away from the foundation, and the grading works for the house I built and for the neighbor adjacent to the property.
How many times have you changed a deck to a patio in 29 years?
I've done a lot, because every town is different. Some towns, they say the deck and the patio it counts as impervious coverage. Like the deck does not count as impervious coverage, but the patio does. Every town is different, but I honestly, the last time I built a deck was many, many years ago. I only like to build maintenance-free environment for any client I built homes for. And I always suggest doing a patio. I have a patio in my house. I love patios. It's easily repairable. If there's anything that settles, you can just repair it. A deck is kind of different. It wears. It has splinters in it. So I always like patios, and I always recommend patios to everybody.
And when you began development, were you aware that the deck was, as it was described in the approval, a part of the development?
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Were you
it is-
aware
yes,
that the deck was part of the original approval?
Yes, I saw
And
that-
so at what point in the construction did you decide to change your mind, or did the homeowner decide to change their mind based on your opinion that decks aren't as good as patios, that you would override the approval?
Okay, well, it was no homeowner at the time, so I made a decision on my own. I said I just like the decks. I didn't think it was a big difference or a big deal changing a deck to a patio. So that's why I like patios. I made the decision on my own, and I just like the reason because I like them better.
Okay. And having visited the site, I noticed that the soil has grass in the right of way, has grass planted on it.
Correct.
Did you plant that grass?
Yes, I stabilized the grading.
And at what point in the process did you plant the grass?
The time I was finishing the landscaping.
Okay, so
the green giants and the sod. So I added the seed and hay, and I planted some trees in the right of way, about over 20 trees.
and you testified that the soil had been moved from lot 9.02 to 9.01. And at that point, is it true that you just decided that you would take the remainder of the soil and put it in the right of way and then plant grass on it to stabilize it, to accommodate what you felt was just simply, in your own opinion, a better plan for the site, regardless of any city approval or any plans that had been established?
That's correct.
And in 29 years, have you ever gone on to an approved plan and decide in mid-construction that your opinion about what should happen is better than what was approved, that you would just go about making changes in such way?
I done it slightly, like I said, I built a lot, like in Brickley Heights and Chatham, in Short Hills, I built a lot of homes, and sometimes the grade is so low, we put boulder walls and we add soil to level out the backyard. And it was always, okay with with the township engineers. They liked the plans, they liked how I changed it a little, slightly. And I never had an issue with.
If the right of way was improved, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Easton.
Sure.
If the right of way was improved in some way, would you have made the same error?
I couldn't. I would have to build a retaining wall.
Okay. And how many trees were taken down above what was permitted?
It was a lot of tiny trees. It was dead trees, and it was good trees there as well. I would say the good trees, no more than 6, 7 good trees that I took down. Not big calibers, maybe 8, 9, 10 calibers. They were small, and that's all I took down. But most of them were dead. There was a lot of bushes there, a lot of just big giant green giants, overgrown. That's all it was there.
And are you aware of what kind of natural growth was there versus now what is grass and weeds?
Yes, it was still a slope on it. It was not level at that, behind lot 901. If you look at lot 9, it has a 30-foot drop. If you look at lot 902, it has a 20-foot drop. And basically lot 901 has the least steep slope on all of them, as it stands right now, even the way it was before we touched it. So
in hindsight, what conditions of approval from the first approval do you now see were not followed? Are you aware of how many?
Where we did it just on lot 901, we raised the grade. We didn't, we raised the grade to make a flatter backyard. That's where all this issue became an issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yassine. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other members have questions for Mr. Yassine?
Yes, yeah, I do, Bill. Thank you. Mr. Yassine, thank you for your testimony. To Mr. Fiore's point, if you had gone first, Ms. Muller would have been spared all of us, for lack of a better word, attacking her, which we did not mean to do. I think all of us just would have liked to have been told why we got to where we are today, and it probably would have been better that you had gone first. And nobody's accusing you of, doing something, nefarious, for lack of a better word. But I think to Mr. Delory's point, you're a highly experienced real estate developer. You've been doing this for 29 years.
Yes.
And just a word of advice, and this is my own personal advice, I think you're better off in the city of Summit coming and saying, I think a deck looks better. I know a patio looks better. I know I got a deck approved. I'm going to go down to community services and get it changed, because I think you got a lot of people's feathers ruffled and you put some stuff in the public right away, where, to Jay's point, I really don't think the Common Council, and I'm not going to speak for them, but I really don't think they're going to be too thrilled that you went and dumped a bunch of dirt in the city of Summit.
I apologize. I learned my lesson. I know this is something that I won't do again. I'll make sure I go back to the town and get their blessing before I do any changes.
Yes. And that's all we're saying is, and, you know, like, again, nobody's accusing you of doing something here, you know, to like against all of us, but you got to look at it from our point of view, because the board spends a lot of time approving stuff that we expect to be followed. And if something wants to be changed, then come back and ask. That's all.
I agree 100%.
And again, thank you for your testimony.
Anytime, my pleasure.
Any other board members have questions of Mr. Yazim? If not, we can go to our consultants, or any members, any consultants have any questions of Mr. Yazim?
I just had a quick question. So when the construction started, there was supposed to be a super silt fence, which is used for steep slope protection, installed along the limit of disturbance on all the lots. So I'm kind of wondering how that silt fence could have been ignored and the fill going considerably past that point.
Well, I mean, the silt fence was on a lower grade, but when we start to backfill, of course, you know, the grade got a lot higher, so the silt fence was on the bottom. And when we start grading, we remove the silt fence, and we just grade and clean up the whole site. We remove it, you know, and stabilize it.
So the limit of disturbance was moved from where it was approved to where you determined would be your limit of grading.
Yes.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Burgess, any questions?
I do not have any questions of this witness.
Okay. Any members of the public?
Mr. Chairman,
Warner,
just a
Mr. Warner,
few quick ones.
Yeah, Mr. Warner, would you have any questions? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hussein, you said you're the principal of the applicant, correct, Mountain View?
I'm the principal of the
Okay.
company.
Are you the managing member of the
Yes,
LLC entity?
Yes.
Okay. And you testified in connection with the original application in 2017, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did I understand you correctly to say you didn't understand that Sheffield, the setback from Sheffield was a front yard setback?
I did not pay attention to that. That's correct. I did not know it was, I needed a setback from Sheffield.
Okay, but did you understand that the approval you obtained as the principal for the LLC in 2017 specifically stated throughout the resolution that it was a front yard setback from Sheffield? There was frontage on Sheffield. Sheffield was creating a new lot, a through lot, excuse me, that required variance relief for creating a through lot, et cetera, et cetera. Did you understand that at the time?
I did. Again, you know, when we were doing the construction, it was an oversight that I didn't pay attention to a patio that's going to be encroached on the setback. I just didn't.
Did you, you said that different towns do different things and handle things in different ways, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Who specifically did you ask from the city before you decided to make the change from the deck to the patio?
I did not ask anyone. I thought a deck or a patio didn't make a difference. That's why I decided to do a patio for maintenance-free patio.
And you said engineers in some towns, they don't mind that or like that or something, you said, or?
No, it said some towns, they consider a deck non-impervious coverage, and some towns, they consider it impervious coverage.
Right, because the slats, the water can go through the slats, and so arguably it can be pervious. Right.
Yeah, and then the patio, also the water really penetrates into the sand. So I you know, if my architect was a patio, which is, I mean, a deck on the plans, I always like to change it to a patio because I always like patios for less maintenance and less callbacks. I mean,
Right,
when I
but if a deck sometimes is considered pervious where the water can go through it, and a patio is impervious where the water cannot go through it, were you concerned at all about that change?
No,
From
because
pervious to impervious
I
potential?
was not, because we had enough coverage.
Okay, so
the-
you made that determination yourself, but again, you didn't make any inquiry of the engineer for the city or anyone else for the city.
That's correct.
Okay. The, are there other alternatives by which this board can render a determination? For example, you've mentioned one of the one of the issues is roughly 100 square feet could be tempered, whatever, off the corner of the patio. Well, let me strike that. First question: do you know how much usable backyard area was provided by the board by virtue of your initial application for this lot? How much usable rear yard area did you have?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
I mean, I can ask Kathy, I'm not sure. Kathy would know the measurements.
Well, she was asked that question earlier. She didn't know.
As a usable backyard, how it was approved, you asking me?
Yes,
How many square feet?
approximately.
No, wait, Mr. Yassin.
Yeah.
Perhaps Miss Muller can refer to sheet 3 of her plan and comment on that answer. I think it's beyond the scope of this witness's knowledge.
Well, respectfully, if I may, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, Mr. Sheehan, the gentleman is a 29-year experienced builder. He's the managing member of the entity that obtained the approval 4 years ago. He sought 3 lots with 3 backyards that he wanted to be usable. He got a certain amount of usable lot area for this particular backyard on 903, and he made a determination that he needed to disturb further steep slopes in order to obtain what he felt was a sufficiently usable rear yard in the context of the construction process. I think he's more than established that he can answer the question roughly how much usable area in the rear yard did he ask for originally, and how much is he asking for now?
It's probably 50%. I'm just taking a guess. I mean, not sure. I mean, Kathy, you probably need to help me out with that. But I believe maybe 50%. But if you, I'm not sure, Mr. Warner, if you took a look at the landscape approved plans by the town, if you look at the landscape plans that was approved by the town and you look what I built, it's the same.
Okay.
It's the
No,
same
I'm not looking at landscape plans. All I'm trying to do is get
Right.
the appropriate information in front of the board so they can make a reasonable determination on the application. It would seem to me, particularly since other board members asked, what is roughly the size of the rear yard usable that you obtained approval for in your initial application, and how much more are you asking for now? After the change in the field of what was originally approved by way of soil movement into the right of way.
I mean, as I said, I think
Mr. Warner.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yes.
Sheehan, please don't interrupt him when he's answering a question. I think he can answer the question. And if he can, he'll tell us.
Again, I said I'm estimating could be like 50%. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have the plans right in front of me right now, but
You're asking for 50% more than you originally asked for in the rear yard? Is that what you're saying?
no, I mean that we disturbed.
Right, but I mean, maybe I'm not clear. Let me try to clarify, and it's my fault. Let me try and clarify the question. Roughly, how big was the rear yard you sought for your purchaser for 903 originally, and how much bigger your prospective purchaser? I understand you didn't have one at the time, and how much bigger is the rear yard that you're asking for now? Usable rear yard.
I'm sorry, I'm still confused on your question. I'm very, I'm confused the way you're asking the question.
Yeah,
So maybe someone can
Warder.
define for us, maybe Kathy can
Warder.
define for us what usable means. I mean, is that a slope of less than 5% or 15% or 20%? What's usable?
I think all good questions, and Kathy, Ms. Muller is the witness who is most competent to answer it without guessing or estimating.
Yep.
So I had the benefit to jump on my CAD here while you guys were discussing it. And typically we'll try and give at least a 20 by 20 flat spot on a backyard, even on steep lots that we do in Watchung, 15 to 20 feet off the back. So in reviewing the plot plan that we had approved, the area that was at grade on the back left off the back of the property was approximate 20 by 20, 15 by 20. Now the flat area off of the patio for the width of the house is approximately 50 by 40. Those are very quick numbers I was trying to grab in the essence of time here. So from 400 square feet flat off the back left, they now have approximately 2,000 square feet of usable lawn area at 5%. I did not account for any 3-on-1 slopes.
Okay, so just for the benefit of the board and candidly counsel who's not an engineer, is it accurate to say that the applicant originally was approved approximately 400 square feet of quote unquote usable rear yard area and is now asking for 2,000 square feet of same? Ms. Muller.
I'm just double checking. Yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just double checking the number here. That would be excluding the patio that was built, and that was about 500 square feet. So in lawn area, 2,000 approximately, and plus the patio, which is 500 square feet.
Okay, so 3 times, the request is for 3 times what was originally approved?
For the math, yes.
Okay, well, the math, yeah. And that's as a result of rectifying the situation that occurred the way the testimony explained it occurred. So it was not by way of approval, but an application for lack of a better term, instead of permission, forgiveness. And that's what the math tells us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Sure, Matthew, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Mr. Chairman Anderson. What is the size of the square footage of the deck that was approved?
Kathy would have that, right? Kathy, you have that?
Well, I would assume it's 500 because in a sense you testified that it was really the material that you enjoyed, but that wasn't the size of the deck.
Correct.
Or did you also increase the size of the patio in a way?
I'm not, I mean, Kathy, you did the as-built, maybe you can testify to that.
So the original size of the deck was considered impervious coverage, to clarify that conversation before. So patio to deck does not change the impervious coverage for zoning or any kind of runoff. The deck proposed was 200 square feet. It was a modest one off the back right corner of the home.
Okay, so in addition to the materials, you also made a decision about almost doubling its size, more than doubling its size on the fly. Is that correct? Or in the field, I should say. Mr. Yassine, is that correct?
I don't think I doubled the size. No, I don't believe so.
Well, it's 500 now, and the deck approved was 200. So that would be more than double. Am I doing the math wrong? I'm sorry.
No, you're doing the math correct, but is that correct, Kathy? It was only 200 approved?
It was 200 starting directly from the front of the house. So when I measured the deck or the patio now, I am measuring the exterior dimensions. So what's usable to the left of the stairs, the stair areas, all that unusable area is what I'm counting as 500 square feet for the patio. So usable would not be that, would not be 2.5 times as large. Again, I'm trying to jump onto my CAD and get you some quick numbers here.
Okay.
But I just boxed out the patio and I looked at our as-built. So that includes everything associated with patio, and then the deck on the approved plot plan is just listed under the calc as 200.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what is the answer, Mr. Chairman? Follow-up question to Ms. Muller. What is the answer to the comparison between the usable deck and the usable patio? Exclusive of steps?
I would need a second just to jump to my CAD here.
Take your time. Take your time.
And while you're doing that, as a point of clarification, the steps were also added, whether they're quote unquote usable or not, they are needed in order to access the deck. So they are, in a sense, a part of a decision that was made in the field that needed to be incorporated into the patio decision, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're doing patio or deck, you need the steps. Either way, right?
Yeah, there were steps shown both on the deck plan and on the patio plan.
Yeah.
Exterior step.
Neither the deck, the patio, or the steps are unpermitted uses. It is only the corner of the deck, of the patio, that is a non-compliant condition.
And not to belabor the point, and it's just the notion that if a decision was made in the field, to Mr. Yassine's testimony about the fact that he likes a lower maintenance stone versus wood,
right,
versus the size, the shape, the layout, that gets into another field of decision making outside of just maintenance. And I think that was what I was questioning about the full scope of the decision, not just in a sense the materials, but the fact that other parts of the deck versus patio were changed in a way that included size, reconfiguration of steps, etc.
No, you're right, absolutely, because when you do a patio, you need to do a platform and then steps. That takes space, and then you need to create a flatter backyard for furniture, for patio furniture. So you're right.
And Mr. Sheehan, not to belabor a point, but to Mr. Fiore's point, this should have been done first. The patio should have been the plan that was submitted to the town, dealing with the wall and the fill and all of that, should have been the engineering, the architectural, and the plan that was submitted. So we're not here again, and we're not accusing Mr. Yassine of anything, but he clearly likes patios over decks.
Right.
So, you know, yes, you can tell us repeatedly it's usable and it's permitted and all that, but I think Matt's made it very eloquently stated that a plan was approved and something in the field was arbitrarily changed. And I don't think people on this board like that. But again, we don't need to belabor that point. I mean, we are where we are. The thing's 3 times, 5 times, 6 times.
I apologize for this. I learned my lesson, and that's all I can.
I have a question, if it's all right. I don't understand, or at least maybe I missed the point, but why was a deck applied for in the first place if a patio was the preferred?
Paul, that hits the nail on. That's I think what all of us are saying. I think
right.
Mr. Yassine's probably regretting that he put a plan forward with a deck. I mean, he's smiling. He didn't want a deck. He liked patios.
No, you know, a lot of architects they just used to put on decks on plans, just put decks, and then it was just again an overlooked. You know, because I didn't have a problem changing a deck to a patio in any other town. So that's why I never really paid attention for it. If I have a deck on the plans or patio, I did what I wanted.
Did you use a different architect for this than you use for most of your projects?
That's correct. The first time I used him, he's Washington. That was the first time I used him.
Okay, guys, do we have any more questions from the board members or from our consultants? It's 10:30 at night. We need to move along here. We've got other work to do. Any other witnesses you need to put forward, Counselor?
Mr. Chairman, can we get that clarification from Ms. Muller as to the exact?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Please.
Yep, that would be great. Yep.
So I measured, and when we do our impervious coverage for our zoning purposes, what we call a deck is only the horizontal portion that you could walk on. We calculate the steps differently. As you've heard tonight, some towns don't count decks as impervious, but the steps are. So the deck area approved was 200. That is the flat horizontal area of the deck. Of the patio, if I exclude the steps and measure it in a similar fashion, is 390 square feet. So it does reduce that area. Those are the two numbers that we would be comparing. And as you heard before, we do put in some buffer into our stormwater and our zoning because these field changes occur. This is not unusual. Unfortunately, the patio did fall into the front yard setback, but we do actually anticipate some field changes. Whether, the grade changes, you hit rock, these things tend to happen. So in this case, it didn't violate any of the coverage or the stormwater. It's just the location of it. So those are the two numbers that you had asked for.
Thank you, Ms. Muller. Mr. Sheehan, you have a wrap up for us tonight, a summary?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just, because the board professionals jumped in and board members, I don't think we actually got a chance for you to ask the public if they had any questions.
Yes, I didn't think we had any public, but if we do, any members
We have
of the
7
public have any
attendees, but I don't know if they're,
interested in asking questions or not. We had
Certainly
asked
want to
for
give them an
questions from
opportunity.
the audience with regard to the first witness. I didn't have any questions of this witness from members of the public.
Chris, they just raised their hand, correct?
Correct. On the bottom of their screen, they'll see the raise hand function if they would like to provide any comments at this time. If not, and I still see none, looks like the board can proceed.
Okay.
All right,
I'm sorry,
let's go forward.
Was that
Yes,
questions
Mr.
and
Warner.
comments, Mr. Chairman? For the
Yes,
public?
either or.
Okay, I'm just so they're clear. We want to make sure it's clear for the public.
Sure.
It's the most
Yep, thank you.
important thing we do, one of them.
Still seeing none.
Okay, so no public question, no public comment.
All right. How about a summary there, Mr. Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is an application that seeks relief, which, if it occurred prior to the construction, is demonstrably in advance of the provision of the general welfare. It provides sufficient space at appropriate locations for a variety of uses, and it meets the needs of the homeowner involved. There is absolutely no negative impact flowing from this proposed amendment to the approval that was previously given. It is evidenced in spades by the absence of any neighbors who previously appeared and opposed the application when it was originally presented. It is a site that has been fully realized in a way that provides a functional rear yard. It provides a modest patio, and it is non-compliant in terms of its steep slope disturbance, and your statute does not preclude steep slope disturbance. It requires that if steep slopes are disturbed, that the impact on stormwater management, soil erosion, and sedimentation is addressed. In this particular instance, the steep slopes themselves had no distinguishable features to them. It was in an abandoned or an undeveloped right-of-way that abutted the 10-foot high acoustical barrier for a state highway, Route 24. The proposed wall that would be required if the applicant, as they have consented to as a condition of approval, removed all of the fill, would be a wall that would be 8.5 feet high, that would be facing a 10-foot wall of the highway immediately adjacent to it. The usable function of the rear yard for the neighbor is something that is justified under the general purposes of zoning, and the location of the nonconformities with respect to the additional disturbed steep slopes and the height of the wall which faces the Route 24 acoustical barrier and the 100 feet of the triangle of the corner of the wall in the unimproved, in the required front yard along the unimproved right-of-way of Sheffield Road, demonstrate a plan which does not create a substantial detriment to the public good, witness the absence of any neighbors who previously opposed the plan appearing in opposition, and which creates no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the master plan, given the location of this lot on the corner of an undeveloped right-of-way and Templar Way in the city of Summit. The applicant has testified honestly and clearly to the nature and the context in which the field changes were made as this lot was developed out. Would it have been better if he appeared in person and asked for the relief and stopped construction? The answer is yes. He didn't do that. His plan that was developed is in fact, by any standard, a better plan for the site than the plan originally approved for and approved by the board in the subdivision that was granted in 2017. If you deny the relief requested, you punish not only the developer, but you punish the homeowner who has moved into this site and has occupied it in good faith. You might ask, well, if this is not a precedent, and Mr. Warder, I would ask to advise in that regard, where is the burden suffered by the developer for his improvident actions? And I would submit to you that the burden is assumed in the cost to address the steep slope and the spill of soil into the right-of-way, the construction of the wall, the establishment of the $45,000 plus escrow, and the cost and uncertainty of the application that is pending before you. He is contrite. There is no precedent. It is an application which on site inspection should justify itself. And I commend it to the board's favorable consideration with apologies for the manner in which the as-built conditions occurred. I thank you for the attention and patience of the board and look forward to a resolution of this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Sheen, could you recap the items in the engineer's memo that the applicant has agreed to? I believe it's 17 and 19 through 24. I was trying to take notes, but I wasn't quite fast enough, I'm afraid.
No, I can do that easily, Mr. Chair. But well, one of the conditions of approval was to satisfy the requirements of the forester. And then with regard to the engineer's report, it was 17, 19, 20,
I think you said
21
9 through 24.
through 24, yes. And all
Okay,
of
I
the
just
other
want to be sure we
reviews
had
were
that.
neutral.
Okay, I just want to be sure we had that. At this point, I think it's appropriate to close the public hearing and to open it up to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, before you do,
yes,
there were other conditions of approval, but we did get them all in the
Oh, there were.
engineer's
I'm
report,
sorry. Yep.
the
let's get those
forester's
written down.
report and all the other reports. And also we'll assume that all prior conditions of approval, the applicant remains subject to them to the extent not inconsistent with any approval that may be granted by the board. And I take it the applicant is submitting to the board with the two alternatives, the 8.5-foot wall for the 40 to 50-foot stretch, so as to relieve all the fill from the Sheffield Way, while the alternative where some fill is left there and the wall is shorter at 6 feet. Is that correct? Both options are available to the board, as you stated previously, Counselor?
Both options are available to the board.
Okay. So if the board understands the relief that it's being requested, the board can deliberate and vote. If the board needs some more guidance as to what they're being asked to do, Mr. Sheehan, myself, we can certainly assist.
Mr. Warner, could I ask you to advise on the question of whether or not this constitutes a precedent?
With the board's permission, I will. Chairman's permission, I will.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please do. Yeah, we're going to ask the same question. Good question.
Okay. From a legal perspective, and as I think I've told this board before, we like to say that in land use applications, there is no such thing as precedent. Because every application comes before the board with some differences, no matter how similar things may look. So technically, from a legal perspective, what you are being asked to do in each application is different from every other application. So you're not bound necessarily, if you make a determination one way in one case, that you have to make the exact same determination in another case that seems to be the same, because technically no two cases are the same as we view it in the land use law world, and maybe Mr. Burgess can speak to the planning world as well. That said, as far as the implications of granting applications for permission, for forgiveness as opposed to permission, that's a different type of precedent perhaps, and the board can make its own determination as to how comfortable it feels when it's, when it's being asked to grant such forgiveness, particularly if it's being asked to grant such forgiveness multiple times. The impact that may have on developers in the municipality, that's not a legal issue. That's a practical and pragmatic determination for the board members to make for themselves. But it's not before the board as far as legal relief. And there's a question from Mr. Chairman from Councilwoman Little.
Yes, Councilmember Little.
Thank
You're
you.
on mute.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Attorney Warner, can you also just, I know this is complex and we've talked about a lot of different things. As it happens, I have a specific interest in the involvement of council following our determination. So can you go back to, how this is if we either vote to approve or disapprove, how that's going to affect the council involvement in regards to the right of way?
Certainly, as I understand it, and I always stand, corrected, subject to correction. The if you pick the option with the 8.5-foot tall wall for a 40 to 50 stretch, there's going to be no soil, as I understand it, left in the right of way. So presumably there's no council determination to be made. If you pick the 6-foot tall wall for a 40 to 50-foot stretch, and I'm paraphrasing, then I believe there would be soil remaining in the right of way, and a license or similar permission would need to be obtained by the applicant from the council. If it's that, there's a third choice, a denial. I don't mean to take away any choices. My understanding from council is he thought it best that if you were going to choose the 6-foot wall and council permission was going to be required as a condition of approval, he seemed to be asking that there be a delay in the vote on the proceedings. Candidly, I don't see why it could not be simply a condition of approval, and that if the council were subsequently to decide no, the board can retain jurisdiction and the applicant could come back. But the applicant can ask you how to proceed, can make that request of you. But those are the 3 different options. That's where the council's potential subsequent involvement would come into play, as I understand.
Thank you. That was my understanding as well, but I was getting, I just wanted to clarify because I was getting a little confused with the coming back and forth and making sure that I understood that correctly.
Understood. I'm having candidly
Counselor,
difficulty
can we now
myself.
Can we close this public hearing or is it closed? Mr. Warner? Is the
It's
public
been
hearing
closed.
at this point?
It's closed.
All right.
It's been closed, yeah.
Officially closed. All right, I'd like to say the following things. This is a pretty straightforward case in my mind. This developer made a mistake. He's come to us and he said he was sorry for this mistake. Building an 8.5, 5-foot wall makes a lot of sense. There's nobody to look at this thing in the back of this street that had been overgrown. He's agreed to take the soil out of it. And that does not involve any issues with regard to council. And that seems to be the simplest and most direct way to deal with this problem. If anyone is concerned about this applicant having sufficient concern or having sufficient impact with regard to his decision, one must think about that in some ways. And maybe we're not allowed to think about the impact to the applicant financially, but let's think about the bond that he put up. Let's think about the fact that he's got to build a wall. And let's think about the fact that he's got to take all that dirt and do something with it. And then he's got to plant the slope. So this is not without any cost to this developer, both in terms of time and in terms of money. So I don't think the process that he's gone through would attract other developers to do the same thing, having seen what this gentleman has had to go through. So that is my thoughts on this particular application. Any other board members like to speak up?
If I could ask Mr. Dewar, thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. If I could ask
Yeah.
Mr. Dewar if he has an opinion and if he's spoken to the city engineer and you have any idea engineering wise, because I'm not an engineer, of what the city would like to see happen. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the thought would be to restore the right of way to the original grades that were preceding the application. An 8-foot wall seems fairly tall for that area, and that I would almost recommend that they do a staggered wall and set back one from the other.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I may just make some final comments before I relinquish to the
Yes,
board
please
members,
do.
if you don't mind. Just real quick, I know this has been labored, but so much time has been put into the DRO, and Summit has really done just a thoughtful job on creating rules that have allowed it to become a wonderful place to live, work, and play. And I think that's why when somebody comes before the board to vary from its laws and then continues to move in a direction of not checking back with the city, that yes, it's forgiven as a human and it's something that we will move on from. But I do think it's important to I guess not belabor the point, but stay focused on it. The other thing where I might slightly and civilly disagree with Mr. Sheehan is there is a neighbor, and it is the City of Summit residents who own the piece of property, which is the right of way. The park line is being turned into passive recreation. We really don't know the uses for right of way or where they might go in the future. And therefore the neighbor to the side of this property are the residents of Summit. The city owns that property and it holds value to it. And I think right of ways, while they're abandoned or may not have been used for a long time, doesn't mean that they're to be ignored or that what's growing there isn't part of something that we would want to see in the city. So I agree with Chairman Anderson. I would say that with the engineer's sake, if you feel that the soil's to be removed, I do think that's a better solution. And that's all I think I'd like to say, other than ignorance is not excuse of the law. And we hope in the future that you'll be more careful and all developers take our laws very seriously. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yep. Anyone else on the board?
Mr. Chairman, I just have, sorry, Jay, go
Okay.
ahead.
I'll be brief. I don't think leaving the soil in the city right of way is a solution. I do think, and I agree with Bill, that a taller wall or a double wall, as Chris suggested, is a reasonable solution given the location. We've all heard and discussed the other issues, the precedent issues. We've been told time and again, long before Steve was advising us, this precedents are not established. I think the solution here is to remove the soil from the right of way and require, and perhaps it's a discussion between Chris and Aaron or Rick, whether it's a single wall or a double wall, and he comes back to us with that. I think I'd like to see a drawing now. How much exactly is 8.5 feet high? And I don't mean to belabor it, but I do think we should see a drawing that shows it's 40 feet, 50 feet, and then it taggers down to 6 to 4 to 2. That's the kind of stuff that I think we should see. And with that, I would very much be in favor of moving forward, permitting this with that one condition of, in addition, of course, to those that Steve enumerated, move ahead with that as a solution.
All right, any other members on board?
Yeah, Jay,
Andy?
I just have a quick comment. And Jay, I agree with what you just said about, the whole precedent stuff. But my only concern is, everything, Steve, you've told us all along, everything is per case. So in this particular instance, it's facing the highway, the wall. But my question is, and I'm just going to pick Beth. If this was facing Beth's house and they had to put up a big wall and all the arborvitae and all of that, and it's not facing 24, and we approve this, are we setting a precedent now that we're just going to prove it and it doesn't matter that it's facing Beth's house or it's facing my house or it's facing Jay's house? So that's the only issue I have here is when is it that we pass a resolution, you're supposed to follow a plan, you don't, you come back, you ask for forgiveness, and then the next time, now it's facing somebody's house that really doesn't like it because it's not facing Route 24. And that's the only real concern I have here is when does Beth, when does Bill, when does Jay get to now sue because it's facing our houses? That's, when is it not a precedent?
We take each one of these cases individually. As Steve said, there's no precedent from one to the other. And if it was facing Beth's house, this wouldn't be approved. Because
so then why is it being, so that's my point. Why is it being approved? Because it's facing 24.
One speaker, you're both over one another.
Because it's not facing a house, because it's facing 24, because it's facing a road that is not being used. The context is very different.
Okay, so next, when
comment?
all right, well,
I'm sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that you did,
Andy,
but
go
that's
ahead.
okay. But no, that's okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were still going. Go ahead.
No, I was, but I'm done now.
No, go ahead. No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but my point is, Bill, just because it's facing 24, it's okay. But so we're going to not approve it because it's facing somebody else's house. And then when does the developer get to sue the city because we faced it because it was facing 24, but because it's facing somebody's house that doesn't like it, we've set a precedent. We've approved it because
That's
it
a
faced
Steve
24. Well, that was what I was asking.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
That's
Steve question.
exactly what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you cut me off.
Steve? No. All right, I'm going to cut you off again. Hey, Steve. Steve, could you answer Andy's question?
I could try. The context, as you said, is different here. So this is a different case. As far as when someone can sue the city, this board's decisions there's immunities, and I'll leave that to the city attorney. I don't think anybody has any basis to sue the city as a result of this decision or the decision in the hypotheticals that board member Perla came up with. But those cases are not this case. And as I said before, each and every board member can decide how comfortable they are with how many applications for forgiveness the board grants, but every case is different. And certainly I think board member Perella pointed out the difference between this case and a case where the proposed solution would be facing someone's property, someone's home, as opposed to Route 24 and a sound wall.
I think
That's
one
that's
excellent
probably
example
the
of that
best
is
I
we
could
have
do. I'm sorry.
I think one thing you can say about this case and why the context is different is we have no one here complaining. No neighbor is here saying we don't want this. So that would be an indication to me that it's not tremendously impacting too many people other than the people driving by on Route 24. So any other members of the board who'd like to talk? We are trying to get through debate here, and if there's no more debate among the board members, then I think I'd like to entertain a motion to approve, subject to the conditions that we've outlined.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could get one more stipulation from Mr. Sheehan on behalf of the applicant based on a condition that appeared to arise as a result of Mr. Dower's input, and that is with the applicant stipulate if the ultimate solution is a double wall or multi-wall solution, would the applicant stipulate to that as a condition of approval or part of the application?
Yeah, Mr. Warner, the answer is yes. And through the chair, the member who asked for a plan to come back before the board, I would ask if the board would accept the wall as approved by the city engineer and the consulting engineer without the need to come back, given the fact that there are homeowners who are currently living in the property.
I don't know if Jay, you have any thoughts on that? We also won't be meeting again until the September 27th.
Right. I was just, yes, given that it's 60 days, that seems quite a burden to be asking. And I would certainly be comfortable relying on the engineering department to, Rick or Aaron and Chris to sign off on what the appropriate actual on-site application is, whether it's 6 feet or 8 feet or 7.5 feet, whatever it needs to be. I'm fine. I'm fine with that, but obviously it's just my suggestion.
Thanks, Jay. So I'm asking for a board member to make a motion to approve as outlined, if anyone is willing to do that.
Motion to approve.
Thanks, Rich. And do we have a second?
Can I just clarify that we're making a motion to approve it with the 8-foot fence and removing all the soil from the right of way?
Or perhaps
Yes,
up
and
to
it
an
could be either
8.5 foot tall fence.
I'm not getting that. I need a clear answer to that question.
Yes is the clear answer to that. Removing all the soil from the right of way with the fence.
And I believe up
And it
to
may be,
8.5 feet tall is what the board is being asked to approve.
Or allowing the engineer
or-
and the professional to
Subject
come up
to
with
the
an
end.
acceptable solution.
Correct. Okay.
I don't
so we
think
have a
Bridget got a
second for
clear
that?
answer that. Well, I don't
No,
think Bridget got a clear answer what we're proving.
Okay, that's a good point, Andy.
Thank
Let's
you.
maybe Steve, you could clarify it.
Thank you. I make a few.
I understand,
Bridget, are you,
board member
Bridget,
Fiore's.
did you hear what we're voting on? Is it clear or do we need to repeat it?
You need to repeat it because you're talking over one another.
Okay, so Steve, maybe you can recap and we'll all be quiet while Steve does that.
I'll try my best. I believe board member Fiore made a motion to grant the application with the up to 8.5 foot tall wall, subject to the consulting engineer and the board engineer, or excuse me, the city engineer, as to a multi-wall resolution for up to an approximate stretch of 40 to 50 feet along the Sheffield Way frontage, with all of the soil removed from the Sheffield right-of-way and all the stipulated to conditions which we've previously addressed, and I will not again, unless asked.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Is that, Rich, is that helpful?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's what we are
Bridget, did
waiting
you get
for a
that?
second on.
Yeah.
I'll second
We thought we
that.
had a second, but anyway,
You
okay,
did.
thank you. And I just want to be sure Bridget got that.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so now we need a vote, a call for a vote there, roll call vote. Chris?
Sure. Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Councilmember Little,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
and Chairman Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sheehan, and we appreciate that very much. And we'll go on to other members, other business that the board has to do tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Good night,
Bridget.
everybody. Good night, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, everyone. I know that was a challenging application for a number of reasons, and when I first saw that application, I was surprised. Anyway, so we have a couple other items. I think tonight we really would like to deal with these two resolutions that we have, and the last item on the agenda with regard to the bylaws. I suggest that we tackle that next time. We received, as I said earlier, the 1996 version, and earlier to that, Chris sent out the proposed work that Steve and his team have done. Steve and Amanda have done on it, and so I think the best thing to do would be for the board members to read those two, and then for us to talk more about it at the September meeting. So I guess we have two resolutions to discuss. Anybody has any comments on the first resolution on the agenda? If you do, please let us know. I've read through that and it looked fine to me. Any other comments or question about the Summit Spine Clinic or whatever you want to call it? Sorry, there, I got it here. Sorry, the Summit Sport and Spine resolution. And it seemed pretty straightforward. So no comments. Is this a voice vote that we do, or is actually a roll call vote? Or?
A roll motion,
To approve
second,
this
and roll
resolution?
call vote, those who are qualified
All right,
to
so-
vote on it.
Yep. Could we have a, if everyone is okay with this, could we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, and a roll call there.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Councilmember Little,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
and Chairman Anderson.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we get to Steve's novel, War and Peace. Steve, this is
Mostly
one heck of
war,
a
but a little
resolution.
peace.
There was a typo
This is
on
one
page
heck-
89, paragraph 3, line 6, sixth worded. You spelled the wrong.
Yeah. We've
That was
had a lot
intentional.
of resolutions. We've had a lot of resolutions on this board, but nothing quite like this.
Well, actually, I do
some
have my own
comments.
corrections. Very
Oh,
quickly.
good. All right.
Oh, good. Thank God, because none of us
Let's see
read it.
I read it.
But I know it's right.
Item 9, Steve.
I read it. I slept
Item
well
9
for the
on
last 3 weeks, Steve. It was the best sleep I've had in 3 weeks. I got rid of the Xanax, the Tylenol PM. I read this every night now.
So Steve, on item number 9 in the list of exhibits, there were a couple of them, A8 and A9, that were dated November 2021. I thought that might be a little bit
Premature.
might have been 2020.
We'll make those 2020.
Bill, that's why I was sleeping. It was 2019. I mean, come on, Bill. Like, seriously.
Sorry. I got to get a life because I read this thing. Item 50, Steve. I guess I can answer my own question here. When I looked at the fact that
I'm sorry, which item is it?
Item 50, number 50.
Okay,
number
paragraph
51.
50. Okay.
Yeah, paragraph 50. I don't have the page numbers, but it looks like that on certain hearings, we took questions from the public. And then I guess when we got to testimony at the end is when we listed the names of each individual. And I assume that the qualification would be one is testimony and one isn't. Is that right with regard to that? In other words,
Correct. There's no prohibition to naming names, so to speak, when they ask questions, but generally we're not as detailed in the question asking and answering. We're focusing more on the answers from the witness. When it's comments from the public, that's their sworn testimony. We always, give their name and address because that's testimony. Yeah.
Then on item 56, this is my last one. Item 56, it starts off, the first paragraph starts off, it says preliminarily. And I just wondered, maybe that's a term of law or term of art. Is it tentative when you say preliminarily?
Yeah, well, it was intended and what we did before we got into the meat of addressing the site plan approval and the variance relief sought and whether or not the criteria was met, we thought it important to address some preliminary general principles, such as the burden of proof is always on the applicant. The board has the authority, like every board, to accept or reject expert testimony from experts, pick which expert they find more credible, which they don't, et cetera, et cetera. And so those predicate issues were dealt with primarily in paragraph 56 and 57 before we got to the heart of the matter.
Okay. And then I have one other academic question. Since we've basically said that we can't create precedent in the decisions, Andy will like this question, that we can't create precedent in decisions. We have a series of cases cited throughout this, throughout the documents, throughout the resolutions. So I guess that's the question. Is it case law?
Thank you. Bill, there you go.
Now, the case, I'm sorry, let me make sure I understand the question before I answer it. That's what I instruct my witnesses to do. Can you clarify the question, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, it's an academic question, because when we say that each case is different, and as I said with Andy, context makes a difference. Each case is different, yet we cite cases when we do these resolutions. So that's where I get a little confused, and I'm sure it's something to do with law that I don't understand.
Well, and Bill, just to clarify where I come from, my father was a real estate professor for 62 years. So this
Oh,
is
man.
what I grew up surrounded by. So when like you sit here and you say things like, I remember being in banking and doing loan documents and paragraph after paragraph after paragraph said the same thing. And I called him up when I was like 20 years old and said, why is it repeated? He said, because if you don't repeat the paragraph in the same, and it's different in another page, it throws it all into question. So that's the only reason why precedent is an issue in my brain. And to your point, we cite cases that arise out of what we do.
Right.
I can explain the difference. I better
Thank
be
you,
able
Steve.
to.
That would be nice.
It's my gig.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to the 62 years yet, Andy, but keep your money on me. I'm going to get there.
There you go.
The case citations are not there to say that each and every case is the same, and therefore you have to, this case is the same as that case, so therefore I'm citing case X because case Y is just like it. The cases are there because they stand for certain legal principles, and good lawyers, good ones, can distinguish between different cases. But the principles, the legal principles that survive irrespective of the factual context of each case, those are what you are looking to those case citations for. For example, the principle, the board has the authority to accept or reject testimony of witnesses. And if made reasonably, that decision which to accept and which to reject, then it's conclusive on appeal. They cannot be reversed. It's not arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. That is a legal principle. That doesn't mean Joe's a variance application on his case is the same as Sally's variance application on her case, because they're both asking for front yard setbacks on 50-foot lots, whatever. They're all different, but that legal principle carries forward. And that's why you see multiple cases. And
well,
the way
that's
the
a good
law
thing for
works,
us to understand.
yeah, and the way the law works is you have a statute and it tells you what you can do or can't do, but doesn't cover everything. It gets the blanks get filled in by cases. And when they rise to the level of being published, particularly if they go above the trial court level to the appellate division level to the Supreme Court in New Jersey level for state court cases, they get greater weight and authority behind those principles. So that all comes into play, and that's not for you to worry about, but because it's for me to worry about. That's my gig. But I obviously enjoy helping explain it, because that's that legal authority, along with the planning parameters, along with the engineering principles. That's what you are making your quasi-judicial determinations based on all those things. And that's why you're blessed to have Joe Burgess and Chris Dower and cursed to have me help you with those decisions.
But I think
Steve, but that's important. No, but Steve, that's important because when the planner for this particular thing comes before all of us and starts talking about Dunkin' Donuts and things that us as not lawyers don't know and you do, and we're sitting here being told, well, Dunkin' Donuts this, Dunkin' Donuts that, or, Joe Blow versus the town of XYZ, we have to then sit there and say, well, wait a second, what does that mean? And that's why I was harping on this whole precedent thing. Like, was this a massive issue? No, but are we going to then do something that somebody's going to be able to come back later and say, well, you did it for them, then I'm entitled to it. And that's all I'm trying to get at is because we have people that recite cases, to Bill's point, and then we get resolutions that cite cases, and Beth's a lawyer and whatever, but we're not all lawyers here.
But you
know,
don't have to
so-
worry about the precedents. Your determinations are not precedential.
All right.
Legal principles.
And I worry about that.
I know, but we wouldn't, and that's why.
Clearly.
And as you know, and I know we're belaboring and it's getting late, but as you know, if it's a contested application, my job and Joe's job and Chris's job gets a little easier because you have potentially planners and engineers and attorneys on both sides, yes or no, right? Grant or oppose. So it makes it a little easier for us. But even when you don't have objectors, planners, engineers, and attorneys, you still have us to be able to keep everybody honest, if you will, and keep the board informed, to the extent we deem it appropriate. And
Steve, my concern tonight was not so much objective precedent, but more subjective reputation precedent.
That's a different ballgame, as I return.
It's a whole
Right.
different.
And by the way, Council Maddox, I love that.
Well,
I pretended I didn't remember the word.
We're
That
still
was
on the
awesome.
record, and we're still.
And no, but I love when he comes before
Well,
us.
wait, we're
He
still-
teaches me something new all the. Council Maddox was awesome. I love that.
It's a kitchen appliance.
That's right.
It's awesome.
Well, we'll talk about the Fifth Amendment next time. But but yes, we don't yet have a resolution memorializing that decision, and we don't yet have 45
Right.
days expiring thereafter. So we won't talk about any pending
Oh, that's fine.
application.
So I think we need to wrap up this resolution. I think. I'm sorry, I just sort of jumped in there. Steve, you said.
Sure.
you had-
Yeah. No, you're right. Thank you. If you're done, Mr. Chairman.
I am. Thank you very much. It was very
Pat-
well written.
Thank you. Paragraph 56, second line. I just want to move that first sentence. It says it ends it with the word "are," A-R-E. I'm going to move that over so that it reads, "must decide what are the true facts." I'll be able to sleep at night now. And the next page, 57, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down. We had a couple extra words in there that I caught. It says "before the." I'll make sure Amanda takes it out when she sends it to Chris. It won't have that in it.
Okay.
It was Amanda's fault. Is that what
No,
you're
it was
trying to say?
my fault. It was my fault always. The buck stops here.
Thank goodness we have Amanda.
And
Thank God.
that's
Could you
right.
imagine?
That's right.
It's like, thank God we have Jay, Bill.
Right. No question.
So with
And
that,
also-
I have no other proposed revisions. We have the chairman's revisions. If there's no other revisions, do we
How
have a
about,
motion to adopt as revised?
I heard
In all
something.
seriousness, though, I would like to say, Steve, this was very well written. It was a
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
complex hearing. It went on for many, many, many months. There were many changes to the application. Because you have all known me at this point, I did read the entire thing. And
So did I.
and for to make
Liar.
sure that everything was captured in the document, and I want to commend you. It was very well done. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
That's my only comment.
Thank you.
Great. Any other board members comment on the resolution? Or are we ready to have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve. So moved.
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
Second.
Great. Thank you, Jay. All
I like
right.
when Jay and I agree.
Yeah, that's right.
Mostly we do.
It's a force
We
of
do
nature.
mostly. It happens.
Well,
All
I
right,
didn't think you were gonna leave that dirt on your road. Get that damn road, dirt off my
Yeah,
road.
Jay, if you mess up the soil next to my house, you and I are gonna have a big problem. I'm telling you that.
That's right. All right, Chris, do we need a roll call vote here?
we sure do. Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Councilmember Little,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Perella,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
and Chairman Anderson.
Yes. All right, well, thank you all very much. All I can say is with the adoption of this resolution, thank goodness that we have resolved the Primrose case, the longest case in my time on the board. And thank you all very much for sticking with us on that. I know it was driving people to drink. And maybe.
Bill, thank God we approved the breweries. I mean, look at what Rich did all
all
those
interrelated.
months.
I was just going to say that. Andy. So you're absolutely right. Thank God we approved the brewery. Anyway, so thank you all very much. We're going to skip the August meeting. I know that you'll be disappointed, but the next time
Oh my God.
will be September 27th, whether it's virtual, in person, or some kind of hybrid. We'll hopefully have that all resolved by then. So, and then we'll have some conversation with regard to the updated bylaws. Something to look forward to and something to read over the summer, Andy.
I'm telling you, I'm just reading Steve's resolution on primrose of sleeping all summer. I'm like a bear.
Yeah.
I'll send you my bill.
All right.
Hey, no problem. I'll forward it to Bill.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all very much and have a great rest of the summer.